A salaryman bowed deeply before his boss, silently accepting the reprimand for a mistake he had made. He didn't argue or defend himself, he simply lowered his head in obedience. Afterward, he returned to his cubicle and resumed working as if nothing had happened. In the middle of it all, exhaustion overtook him and he slumped back in his chair, muttering that he just wanted everything to end. When he opened his eyes again, he realized it was already time to go home. He left the office and walked mindlessly through the streets, lost in his thoughts. Along the way, he noticed a cute stray cat and was briefly captivated by its quiet elegance. But then he spotted a car speeding toward it. He clicked his tongue in frustration, realizing the cat hadn't noticed the danger. Without thinking, he rushed forward to save the small creature, throwing himself into harm's way. As the impact became inevitable, the truth settled in. He was about to die. He was only 30 years old. Knowing there was nothing he could do, he muttered a faint whatever. Imagine your last thought being In the end, he was single and would finally be free from work. His parents abandoned him, and they left him with debts. On top of that, he had been squeezed dry in a black company. Seeing it all now, he realized just how shitty his life was. As darkness slowly swallowed his vision, he expected everything to fade away. Instead, he suddenly found himself awake again. Voices echoed around him. He had survived. The first thing he saw was a grand and beautiful chandelier, which made him question whether he was in a hospital. Just then, his attention turned to a maid close by who was overjoyed to see that the Withall family finally had their firstborn. The salaryman was surprised, but he listened on. Suddenly, the maid turned to the man beside her, Lord Allen, and she asked if he had decided on a name. Knowing that his son was a boy, Lord Allen decided to name the child Inoa Withall. The salaryman protested that his name wasn't Inoa, but he found himself unable to speak. When he raised his hand, the truth dawned on him. He was reborn as a child of the Withall family. Man got nerfed to level 0. As the maid gushed over the sight of him raising his hand, Inoa was left puzzled about what was happening. Years passed, and Inoa was now 8 years old. He lay in his bed exhausted from boredom. It seemed that he had reincarnated as a noble in another world, which meant that he really died that one time. Living in that luxurious, splendid mansion with 3 meals and naps included was the best. However, it was frustrating not being able to go outside. This man can't even touch grass in another world. He guessed that the world he was in was full of many incredible things, and the mere thought of it excited him. Just then he sprang from his bed, clenching his fist and vowing that he would definitely do it that day. Inoa quickly headed for the door, but upon opening it, he was greeted by Camila, his maid. His whole body shuddered as Camila asked him where he was going. He explained that he was just going to take a little walk, but Camila told him he couldn't. She then wondered why every time she took her eyes off him, he would try to sneak out of the mansion. To make him cheer up, Camila then told him that she would allow the stroll if it were under her supervision. Inoa turned away in frustration, mentally cursing his current predicament. And so Inoa ended up agreeing to Camila's terms. As they walked all over the estate, he saw that the guards were in the middle of training. The guards noticed his arrival and they asked if he needed something. Inoa asked if he could watch for a bit, and the guards quickly permitted him, saying that it would really boost their spirits. Swords, spears, armor, it was like watching a movie. Suddenly Inoa noticed a sorcerer murmuring something to a wall. He pointed at him, urging Camila to take a look as well. He asked what the person was muttering, so Camila explained to him that it was called a chant, the preparation to cast magic. A minute passed, and then 5, and then 10. But the sorcerer only kept on chanting. That chant had more filler than a shonen arc. Inoa wondered if the sorcerer was practicing magic, to which Camila answered, not at all. She explained that he was a first-class mage, the pride of House Wishtal. The more powerful the magic, the longer the chant would take. At that moment, Inoa realized that one couldn't just fire them off one after another like in manga or video games. Just then, the sorcerer used a powerful fire magic called the Great Fireball. Inoa's eyes sparkled with awe as this was his first time witnessing such a thing. Just then, Camila told him that it was time to head back to the mansion, leaving him no choice but to comply. And so the soldiers and the sorcerers kept on with their tasks while Inoa looked at them with fascination. When he and Camila finally went back indoors, he asked if he shouldn't be learning things like swordsmanship or magic. However, Camila bluntly replied that it was unnecessary because it was still too early for him. Inoa understood, then he feigned having no interest in learning any of those. Just then, Camila told him to play in his room with blocks or the juggling ball. But Inoa said he was tired of both those things. After all, he was 30 on the inside. Camila suddenly stopped in her tracks, making Inoa nervous. She peered her face close to his, suggesting that she play with him if he liked. Inoa froze, seemingly wanting to refuse her offer. However, Camila touched his face, creepily saying that he was adorable and that she felt like she wanted to eat him up with love. Without wasting time, Inoa bolted away to his room, saying that he felt a huge urge to play with blocks and the juggling ball. Bro saw his life flash again. Camila was surprised by his shyness, but she let him go. When Inoa finally reached the safety of his room, he felt a sense of relief, knowing that it was close. This made him think that he should be more careful from then on. Now that he thought about it, Camila's eyes had always been like that. Just then, he caught himself staring at his reflection in the mirror. which somehow made him empathize with Camila. If he were being honest, it wasn't like he couldn't understand how she felt. After all, he was a beautiful boy with such perfect features, and there was nothing in him to be criticized. He kept on staring at himself, knowing that he was a youth of androgynous beauty. Suddenly, his cheeks blushed red, making him wonder why he was blushing at his own face. He said, "I would simp for me too." Later that night, the chef informed Lord Allen and Inoa that dinner was ready. To Inoa's delight, the food that day looked delicious again. Hearing that, the chef proudly explained that he put in extra effort that day. Inoa immediately took a bite of his food and he was overwhelmed by how delicious it was. Just then, the chef placed a simple meal before a little girl, and it wasn't as grand as the others. The girl smiled upon seeing her food and she thanked the chef. This little girl was named Tracia and she was from the Wishtal family's branch line. That was why the servants treated her coldly. Suddenly, Trezia noticed someone secretly handing her some food from under the table. It was Inoa, and he was signaling her not to say anything. He claimed that he couldn't eat that much, so he wanted to share some with her. He's feeding her like it's contraband. Trezia was stunned by his kindness, so she simply looked away and thanked him. Inoa thought it was inevitable because of her circumstances, but Trezia never opened her heart to him. He hoped that someday they could get along. Just then, Lord Allen called Inoa and he immediately answered attentively. His old man told him that it was time for him to be taught about skills, and after dinner he was to report to his room. Inoa said he understood, but he couldn't help but wonder what his father meant by skills, and so Inoa went to his father's room right after dinner. He cautiously entered inside and his father told him to take a seat. At that moment, Inoa realized that he couldn't feel any fatherly love from Allen withal. Suddenly, Lord Allen put down his book, so Inoa nervously paid attention. The man asked if he knew what a person's worth depended on, but Inoa seemed too puzzled to answer. He frantically tried to come up with a response and he ended up saying that it was the heart. To him it seemed like a good answer. However, Lord Allen's eyes narrowed and he bluntly said no. That was the fastest moral lesson rejection ever. Inoa was mortified and he couldn't make sense of how it was wrong. Just then, Lord Allen revealed that the answer was skills. The skills granted in the evaluation ritual at the age of 12 determined a person's worth, and among them, in the Wishtal family, combat skills were especially valued. Moreover, skills have ranks, and they are divided into 6 levels, from A to F. Lord Allen suddenly peered closely at Inoa, telling him that as a noble of House Wishtal, he must possess an even greater power. He suggested that he didn't need to spell it out for him. Suddenly, Lord Allen stood up, looming over the tiny Inoa. He placed his hand over Inoa's head, telling him that he expected him to live up to it. Inoa stuttered, but he managed to say yes to his father's expectations, and so Inoa turned 12. And at last, the day of the skill evaluation arrived. He found himself in a huge church, where he stood in front of a crowd. Everyone was silent, eager to discover the skills of the Wishtal family's first son. On that day, apparently, about 100 people connected to the Wishtal family came, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that their eyes were piercing him. Suddenly, Lord Allen approached, reassuring him that everything would be fine. Surely he would manifest a rank A combat skill. Inoa was worried upon hearing that, knowing that it didn't really suit his pacifist nature. Just then, the priest announced that they would now evaluate Inoa's skill. After casting a spell, it was revealed to Inoa that his skill was camping, which was classified as rank SS. Inoa's eyes widened in awe, and he tried to make sense of it in his head. Now that he thought about it, maybe it was actually the perfect skill for him. However, Lord Allen didn't seem to have the same reaction as him. He was rather infuriated and he asked what the hell was happening. He freaked out over the legendary Boy Scout build. He screamed that it was a trash skill, and on top of that it was even rank SS, not rank A. The priest explained to Lord Allen that this was a classification he had never seen, so he begged to let him check it again. Still, Lord Allen argued that it was useless, which convinced him that there was no need to check anything. Meanwhile, Inoa kept silent even though he knew that SS was above A. Still, he understood his father's predicament since there were no video games in their world, so he didn't find it strange that they were confused. This was the first time he had seen his father lose his composure that much. At that moment, he realized that this was Lord Allen's true face. Lord Allen whined, devastated over the thought that his son had a low classification skill that he had never seen. He even had 2 of those. Lord Allen's servants tried to calm him down, but he argued that he couldn't possibly do that. Just then, in a fit of rage, he pointed at Inoa and cursed him. He claimed that he was a disgrace to House Wishtal, a comment that stunned the poor boy. He's acting like his son downloaded malware. Just then, the priest approached Lord Allen, informing him that there was also another person who must undergo skill evaluation. For now, he wanted to deal with that. Lord Allen finally regained his composure and he agreed with the priest's suggestion. He then looked over at Trezza, asking if she was the other person to be evaluated. As Trezza came face to face with the priest, Inoa recalled that she had endured discrimination all this time because of her status. He hoped that at least she could gain a good skill and get rewarded for it. Just then, Inoa had a realization. If that happened, his position would completely change in one blow. Surely it would. So Inoa prayed that it would be a combat skill. To Tresha's delight, it manifested. It was a rank A skill, and moreover it was the same one the previous hero had, Magic Swordsman. The Gacha god said favorite child located. As Tracia was dazed by the skill given to her, Inoa celebrated her win. The rest of the crowd was shocked while Lord Allen screamed in victory. Inoa quickly ran up to Tracia, congratulating her for having the same skill as the hero. Then to Inoa's shock, Tracia started laughing like a complete psycho. She then recalled that all that time he always treated her so kindly. That kindness he showed her was obvious, and she was sure that he looked down on her. However, as it turned out, the one looked down upon would be him. Oh, she's been plotting. Inoa was taken aback and he tried to defend himself, saying that he never looked down on her. He just wanted them to get along. As Inoa tried to process everything that was going on, he realized that the one who hated him was none other than Trezia. Just then, Lord Allen forcefully pushed Inoa, telling him to stand aside. He then shook Trezia's hand, telling her that she was the one worthy of inheriting House Wishtal. Trezia quickly shifted her demeanor, acting all innocent while she thanked Lord Allen. Suddenly she asked what he would do to Inoa. Lord Allen looked at his son with disgust as he thought of an answer. Just then he announced that he would be exiled to the sacred mountain of Erasmus. He was no longer his son. Disowned over camping is wild. Inoa was stunned, and he desperately tried to look around hoping to find someone to defend him. However, in the end, they only wanted him because he was a noble with talent. Because of that, he decided that if they were going to judge whether he was useful or not, then he would do the same. To him, their house had no value, so he would gladly accept exile. Reverse Uno on the whole bloodline. And so he was abandoned on the mountain called the Sacred Peak of Erasmus. It was perfectly clear that they intended to get rid of him without directly dirtying their hands, which was truly despicable cowardice. As Inoa wandered the vast forest on his own, he thought that if in this other world he was also going to live a life of exploitation, then he would rather die lying out there. Besides, his skill was camping, so he could probably manage on his own. Thinking of that, he decided to try it out right away. He put his palm out in the air trying to summon his skill randomly. He thought about the kinds of provisions he needed, and he also thought about a frying pan, a cooking table, a chair, and a tent. To his sheer joy, everything he envisioned came to life. His eyes sparkled with glee, amazed that they really appeared after merely thinking about them. He summoned a whole Airbnb. The meat looked top quality, and he wondered if it could be because it was rank SS. The vegetables were shining as well, and both the chair and tent seemed very sturdy. He soaked up the luxuries he had, but he still couldn't stop being excited. Just then he stood up to make a fire, since he planned to cook later. He piled up the firewood, and using his skill he tried to create some fire. To his shock, a massive flaming sigil appeared on the ground, glowing beneath him. He was horrified, wondering what on earth was happening. Just then his attention turned to the pile of wood he gathered earlier, and before he could make sense of anything, a massive explosion occurred. The intense force shot up into the sky, shaking the entire forest. The fire he had created was incredibly huge, and it even caused the grass around him to spark. If this kept up, he predicted that the whole mountain would burn. He nearly deleted the ecosystem. Worried about the possibilities, he quickly decided to put it out. He thought of how he could do that, and as he pondered, he realized that he could use a spell to draw out water. Just then, the same sigil as before appeared, but this time it was in the sky. A huge bucket suddenly emerged from the sigil, which stunned Inoa. The bucket slowly approached the raging fire, and at that moment he could already tell what was about to happen. Inoa froze, watching everything unfold before him. As expected, the bucket, filled with water, poured itself over the fire. It managed to solve Inoa's crisis about the fire, but he also almost drowned in the process. He solved the fire and unlocked a tsunami. As the chaos died down, he tried to cough up the water that he accidentally swallowed. He lay hopelessly on the ground, wondering if this camping skill was actually more dangerous than he thought. Meanwhile, in an area overlooking the disastrous effects of Inoa's powers, a gigantic white tiger stood vigilantly. It licked its tongue, seemingly having found its prey. Bro barely survived waterboarding, and now this. After his unfortunate flooding incident, Inoa decided the fastest way to dry off was to use an outdoor fan. It looked smaller than he had expected, and he honestly doubted whether it would be powerful enough to dry him off. However, the moment he switched it on, his cheeks stretched wide from the sheer force of the wind blasting against him. Why is the camping gear military grade? Within moments his clothes were completely dry, leaving him genuinely amazed. Seeing that the ground around him was still soaked, he decided it would be better to relocate his tent elsewhere. To make things easier, he pulled out his magical backpack to pack up his camping gear. He didn't even need to lift a finger because the bag effortlessly absorbed everything into itself. Mary Poppins-type storage. When he finally slung it over his shoulders, he was surprised by how incredibly light it felt. The weightlessness blew him away, and he wondered how it even worked. Just then, Inoa sensed a menacing presence creeping up from behind him. His body stiffened as the realization sank in. Something was behind him. Slowly, he turned around, only to find a tiger approaching him. The creature was a magnificent pure white, its fur almost gleaming, and its regal beauty momentarily captivated him. For a split second, he found himself mesmerized by the sight. but he quickly snapped out of it, reminding himself that this was no time to be staring. Bro admiring the fur like he's not prey. Suddenly the tiger growled, and it slowly stepped forward. As the creature came closer by the second, and Noah freaked out, thinking that it was going to eat him. The tiger was getting closer, and he knew he had to do something. Still, Noah was glued to the ground, staring at the deadly predator in the eyes as it approached. At that moment, Noah accepted his untimely doom. He prepared for credits to roll. As he waited for the creature to pounce, he realized that nothing was happening at all. When he opened his eyes, the tiger suddenly spoke to him, telling him he was a good person. This horrified Noah, as the tiger could talk like an actual human. Just then, the tiger said that he could have attacked, but he didn't, which prompted her to ask Noah for his reasons in sparing her. Noah thought of a good response, and he wanted to say that it was because the tiger was one of his favorite felines. "Sir, this is a sacred beast, not your Discord kitten." However, he figured that didn't sound right, so he brushed the thought aside. Suddenly, he told the tiger that she was really beautiful and that he didn't mean to hurt her. The tiger seemed confused, so Noah kept on talking. He told the tiger that her fur was so fluffy, cute, and elegant. He also pointed out her eyes as well. Before Noah could speak anymore, the tiger frantically told him to calm down. She finally breathed a sigh of relief, and she called Noah out for his disrespect to a sacred beast. However, the tiger thought that it was good that the savior of the cat god's life was someone as affectionate as him. When Noah asked what she meant, the tiger clarified whether he was the one who helped the cat god in another world. Noah tried to make sense of what this cat god was, but then it finally made sense. It was the cat he saved from getting run over. Since Noah saved the cat god, the tiger wanted to return the favor. Despite the tiger's offer, Noah was hesitant about accepting it because he didn't expect any repayment at all. Just then, the tiger said that she was hungry. Although humans didn't seem very tasty, Noah was starting to look very delicious to her. Seeing the look on his face, the tiger revealed to him that she was just kidding. She wouldn't eat their benefactor. That punchline had teeth. Still, Noah thought it wouldn't be a funny joke coming from a tiger. Just then, he offered to prepare some food for her to eat if she wanted. The tiger was ecstatic that he could cook, and she politely asked him to do so. However, before Noah proceeded, he informed the tiger that he intended to move elsewhere because the location was soaked. The tiger seemed to understand and offered to give him a ride. Turning her back to him, she motioned for him to climb on, which completely stunned Noah. He went from exile to VIP safari. She reassured him that it was fine, but he still hesitated for a moment. With little choice left, he reluctantly mounted her back and gripped her fur. The instant his face brushed against it, he nearly melted. The pure white fur was so fluffy like woven silk, and it wrapped around him completely. On top of that, it was so warm and it calmed his heart. The tiger noticed that Noah was entranced by her fur, so she warned him that he must hold on tight. Noah barely processed the warning, so when she suddenly bolted forward, he panicked and clung to her as if his life depended on it. He grabbed that fur like it's life insurance. The tiger dashed through the forest at lightning speed, leaping effortlessly past trees and obstacles, leaving Noah completely bewildered by what was happening. Noah told the tiger that she didn't need to go that fast, but she replied that she was only running slowly. The tiger calmly assured him that they were nearly out of the forest, a statement that completely caught Noah off guard. Before he could even process it, they burst past the tree line. In what felt like no time at all, they reached the edge of the woods, and the breathtaking view before them left Noah in awe. He almost died, and now he's sightseeing. Upon arriving, the tiger informed Noah that she knew some delicious ingredients that could be found in the mountain. She volunteered to go collect them quickly and vanished in a flash. Noah felt a bit embarrassed, as he could have gotten the ingredients with his skill. Since he had nothing to do, he decided to plan the meals to cook. He thought about the typical camping food like curry or just cooking that meat from before as a steak. Just then he remembered the chef from his previous estate, and he recalled how delicious his food was. However, it was too bad because he was a despicable guy. Meanwhile, in the Wishtal family's home, Trazia trained with utmost dedication. One of the soldiers asked if she was already training, and another replied that it was a given because she was a magic swordsman. One of the soldiers wondered what Noah was doing in those mountains, which had a lot of scary monsters. With such a useless skill, they guessed he was already dead. The two soldiers were stunned into silence, knowing that it was very possible. They wrote his obituary mid-shift. Just then, one of the soldiers mentioned that last month, during an expedition, their soldier company was annihilated by a monster. If he remembered correctly, that one was also in the mountain. He tried to recall the monster's name, the monstrous bird, cockatrice. Back in the mountains, Noah was peacefully setting up his camping gear when the said cockatrice appeared from the skies. It dove directly at him, but it ended up crashing on the ground. When the dust finally settled, the cockatrice emerged with all its fury. As it wreaked havoc on everything around it, Noah kept himself hidden from its sight. It was a close call, and it almost ate him. He wondered what the monster was, which somehow looked like a vicious chicken that had come to eat him. It's basically KFC final boss. Just then, the cockatrice spotted him, and it immediately dashed forward. As the creature came running, Noah desperately thought of a way to hide himself with something. In a panic, he muttered, "cutting board," which caused the item to appear out of nowhere. The cockatrice slammed its head into it, and it screamed in pure agony. Inoa guessed it must have hurt, and he wondered just how hard the cutting board was. That cutting board is built like vibranium. Also, he couldn't shake the feeling that the monster looked familiar. His eyes suddenly sparkled with awe, thinking that it could be delicious. At that moment, he decided to eat the cockatrice. However, he had one problem: capturing it. Just then, the cockatrice clucked in anger, which caught Inoa by surprise. It then flared up its cheeks, and from it, a ball of fire blew out like a deadly projectile. Inoa quickly dodged the attack, and he couldn't believe what just happened. Before he knew it, the cockatrice started firing numerous fireballs, leaving him no choice but to run for his life. He frantically wondered what he should do. Even with a knife or a rope, he couldn't defeat it with a child's strength. Because of that, he realized that he had to attack from a distance with his skill. That was exactly what he intended to do, so he hid from the cockatrice until he could execute his plan. Just then, he emerged from the tall grass and triggered the stupid bird to try and eat him. He kept on calling the cockatrice an idiot and a clumsy fool, and as expected, it did exactly what he wanted it to do. The cockatrice ran toward him, fuming in anger. Meanwhile, Inoa merely put on some sunglasses, patiently waiting for the creature to approach. Just then, he summoned a lantern to appear, and using maximum light intensity, the creature was momentarily blinded. As it tried to regain its eyesight, Inoa ran farther. He then looked back, using his skill to summon a sandwich maker. When he closed his palm, the gigantic device obeyed his command, trapping the cockatrice inside it. Not the panini press of doom. As the cockatrice tried to process its untimely end, Inoa clasped his hands together, seemingly thanking the gods for his meal. After that, he summoned a portable bonfire and adjusted the fire intensity with his powers. Not long after, the cockatrice slowly cooked inside the sandwich maker. Since the devices Inoa summoned were large, he figured it would take some time to cook. Just then, the tiger arrived, apologizing for the delay. Inoa asked what she brought, but the tiger wanted him to open the tied-up package and see for himself. To Inoa's horror, the tiger brought him a ton of mixed mushrooms and herbs, and he immediately felt the urge to barf. He asked if they could really be eaten, and the tiger proudly confirmed it. She claimed that it was so delicious that she once fainted from eating it. This worried Inoa, and he asked if it would really be okay. Inoa sniffed one of the mushrooms to make sure, and he realized that it smelled a bit like seaweed and mountain herbs. Still, he couldn't deny his hesitation as he looked at the other items in the package. He convinced himself that this world was different, so it was normal to have one or two strange ingredients. And so he decided it would be best to trust what the white tiger said. He's trusting someone who eats raw mountain chaos. Suddenly, the tiger mentioned that she wanted to bring a delicious bird that lived on the mountain, but for some reason it wasn't in its nest. Inoa was intrigued, and he wondered if it was the one with the red crest. The tiger was surprised that he knew of it, but she was even more shocked that Inoa was already cooking it at the moment. The tiger couldn't believe it, especially since it was hard to defeat. Inoa simply smiled, saying that it was all thanks to his skill. While the meat was cooking, Inoa suggested making another dish with mushrooms and mountain herbs. The tiger got excited, and she wanted to join in. Inoa quickly took out another portable bonfire and placed a pot over it. He added water from the container with the herbs, and he put it on the fire to make the broth. As he waited, he went on to cut the other ingredients. One by one, he carefully sliced the tiger's little haul of mushrooms. When the broth was finally ready, he removed the wild herbs and added the chopped ingredients. He then added an appropriate amount of sake, mirin, and soy sauce, then covered it to boil. 5 minutes later, the meat and pot were almost ready. When the tiger got a whiff of the amazing aroma, her mouth began to water, and she felt an unstoppable urge to eat right away. Inoa, on the other hand, warned the tiger about her drooling saliva. Not long after, the meal was finally ready, and it looked delicious. Inoa liked to call his creation the grilled cockatrice and the otherworldly mushroom and herb stew. Exile who? This is luxury dining. The meat didn't have any flavor, so he told the tiger that he would add salt and pepper before eating. Just then, he momentarily left his cooking, informing the tiger to wait a moment while he served it. The tiger did her best to fight her demons, and she thought that if she was served a feast like that, then she had to savor it with all her body and soul in that form. This confused Inoa, but before he could get answers, the tiger exploded out of nowhere. Moments later, the dust settled, and a woman emerged from it. She then proudly presented herself to Inoa, telling him that this was her humanoid beast mode. Now this is the legendary pull. The tiger stretched her human body, pleased with the fact that the wind on her skin felt better in that form. Inoa's eyes widened in shock, still unable to believe that the tiger just shifted into her human form like that. He exclaimed that she was now a woman, which seemed very weird since she once had a very masculine tone. The tiger explained that she spoke that way when she was in her tiger form because it sounded so much cooler. Just then, Inoa's attention shifted to the tiger's womanly features, so he immediately closed his eyes in embarrassment. Camping skill has no anti-riz resistance. He didn't know where to look, and it didn't help that the woman was wearing very revealing clothes. Just then the tiger approached him, asking him what his name was. Inoa introduced himself to her, and she complimented him for having such a good name. The tiger then introduced herself as Tia Fredberg, and she held out her hand to Inoa, saying that it was nice to meet him. Inoa quickly took her hand and they both got acquainted with each other. After their brief introduction, Inoa resumed his preparations for dinner. He served the food he had cooked, and together with Tia they sat down to savor the meal. They both thanked each other for the meal, and they wasted no time in digging in. Upon taking their first bite, their eyes widened in delight. The food was too delicious. It was just as Inoa thought. The cockatrice tasted exactly like chicken. It had a lot of flavors, and the more he chewed, the more it stood out. He then tasted the stew, and it was just as good. The mushrooms and mountain herbs, despite their appearance, had aroma and depth. It truly warmed him on the inside. Meanwhile, Tia also enjoyed the delicious meal. She claimed that the meat and mushrooms tasted 100 times better than usual, which convinced her that Inoa was a genius at cooking. However, Inoa felt a bit shy, so he downplayed his achievement. Just then he abruptly stopped eating as he felt a force flowing inside him. He stood up from his seat, asking Tia if she didn't feel full of energy. Tia confirmed that she did, which confirmed Inoa's speculations. She then flexed her muscles, saying that the food was so delicious that she felt full of energy. To her it seemed like Inoa hadn't realized that the food was too delicious. Inoa, on the other hand, noticed that he and Tia weren't on the same page, so he decided to use his skill to find answers. Using the Camping Actions Analyze feature, he discovered that the food they consumed contained godly effects. The grilled cockatrice increased his HP, attack, agility, and even gave him poison resistance. Meanwhile, the otherworldly mushroom and herb stew also increased his HP, gave him recovery, magic regeneration, poison resistance, and intelligence. It was just as he thought. The cause was the food. That stew had expansion pack effects. This made him wonder if this world increased abilities, but he didn't recall feeling anything like that before. He guessed that there could be a secret in the cooking utensils he got with the camping skill, like the knife for example. He quickly analyzed the knife with his skill, and true enough, his speculations were right. The item was specifically called the Divine Level Camping Knife, True Cut, and it maximized ingredient effects and negated toxins or harmful components. It also increased his stats by 5% and gave him a 2% chance of rare ingredient effects. It could even cut any ingredient effortlessly, and its edge never dulls. That blade got LinkedIn achievements. That all meant that he got stronger with the food he prepared with his camping skill utensils. Just then Tia called out to Inoa, asking him to give her another serving. However, it seemed that he was too stunned by his discovery to even notice her. Because of that, she approached him and asked what he was staring at the knife for. She was desperate to know why he was lost in thought, and she demanded that he pay attention because she was talking to him. Inoa quickly snapped back into reality and he apologized to her for being too occupied thinking about something. Feeling bummed out, Tia told him to leave it for later and give her another serving. She was seconds away from flipping the table, and so they both continued their meal, and in no time they ate everything up. Tia thanked Inoa for the food and she exclaimed that it was the best. Inoa, on the other hand, was glad that she liked it. Just then Tia asked him to tell her about his life as they rested after eating. Inoa seemed surprised, so Tia encouraged him to share what kind of life he had and how he helped save the cat god. She wanted to know that and many other things. She remarked that she wanted to hear anything. She wanted to know everything about Inoa. Inoa warned her that it would be boring as he didn't really have an interesting life. Still, Tia reassured him that it didn't matter because she was interested in him. Just then she sprang from her seat, suggesting that they sit down in the meadow and talk. She excitedly told him to hurry up, but Inoa was too puzzled to even react. Still, he ended up following Tia to the meadow, where he soon started talking about his life. By the time he finished sharing everything, it was already sundown, and they both witnessed its beauty. That turned into therapy real quick. Inoa concluded that the story of his life was more or less like what he stated. He then turned to face Tia, saying that it was boring. However, he was surprised when he found her sobbing. He worriedly asked why she was crying, so Tia explained that it was because he was abandoned by his parents twice. He was reborn hoping to be loved by his parents, yet he was exiled to the mountains. It was too cruel. However, Inoa reassured her that it was okay as he deemed himself unnecessary. Tia was surprised to hear him say that, and she frowned in frustration. She quickly reached out to Inoa, locking him into a tight embrace. She angrily told him not to say that because someone as kind and amazing as he couldn't be unnecessary. Meanwhile, Inoa stiffened in shock as he was currently being suffocated between her breasts. That's the warmest near-death experience ever. He always thought his fate was to be unnecessary, and he just accepted it. However, he was just pretending to be strong. This realization drove him into tears and he let himself melt in Tia's embrace. At that moment, he realized that love was so warm. As Inoa sobbed away, Tia panicked and quickly apologized to him. When she finally let go, Inoa desperately grasped for air because he almost choked. Suddenly, Tia said it was decided, prompting Inoa to ask what she was saying. Tia looked back at him with a smile, inviting him to make a contract. She wanted him to become her master. Inoa was stunned, unable to process what she just said. That escalated immediately. As if it wasn't weird enough, Tia elaborated that she wanted him to take care of her like his pet. Inoa frantically asked why she wanted that, so Tia explained that it was simply because she liked him. Tia continued, revealing that she had another reason. Suddenly she appeared behind him in a flash, and at his neck was a dagger he didn't see coming. Tia thought that he was very careless, and if he kept that up he would be killed immediately. She said, "Let me demonstrate real quick." Inoa explained that he didn't have time to use his skill, but Tia argued that he still didn't even know how to use it properly, despite it being an incredible one. That was why she, as his familiar, would protect him. She asked if he understood, and Inoa simply agreed, knowing that she was right. Just then Tia suggested that they perform the contract ritual. She told Inoa to stand in front of her and extend his right arm. He promptly followed her directions, and within seconds a bright light appeared between him and Tia, and just as simply as that, the contract was completed. An emblem appeared on the side of Tia's neck, and the same one could be found on the back of Inoa's hand. Suddenly Tia informed Inoa that he didn't have to speak to her with honorifics, since he was already her master. Just then their conversation was interrupted by a loud roaring noise. In the distance a giant boar approached with incredible speed, and before it was a helpless girl trying to escape. Bro can't digest in peace. Wanting to save the girl, Inoa used his skill to use light magic on the boar. In an instant flames burst out of nowhere, burning the beast to a crisp. When he saw the boar's carcass lying on the ground, Inoa realized that he had found the hang of adjusting the fire's intensity. That was not a spell. That was a barbecue setting. Suddenly, Tia caught a whiff of the boar and she got hungry again. Meanwhile, the girl from earlier finally breathed a sigh of relief. Inoa and Tia approached her and they asked if she was okay. The girl didn't answer, but Inoa saw that she looked terribly exhausted. Suddenly, the girl muttered his name, so he asked how she knew him. This confirmed his identity to the girl, so she immediately bowed her head on the ground, thanking him for saving her. Inoa frantically asked what she was doing, and he told her to lift her head. Bro saved her and got instant worship patch. The girl followed his command, then she introduced herself as Romaria Cascade, a slave expelled from the Wishtar family. Inoa was surprised, as he couldn't recall having any slaves at home. Romaria thought it was only natural for him not to know because most of the orders meant receiving lashes from Lord Allen. Lord Allen's collecting villain points. Inoa quote. His eyes widened in shock, knowing that she was talking about his father. He fell silent, but then he put his arms around Romaria and carried her. Romaria yelped in embarrassment, but Inoa told her not to worry because he would take her somewhere safe. He advised her not to hurt herself and not to push. Romaria worriedly told him to stop as she was concerned that he might get dirty. However, Inoa only reassured her that if that happened, then he would just take a bath. He then smiled at Romaria, telling her that she would also take a bath. This stunned her because someone of her status wouldn't dare bathe with him. Just then Tia suggested that the three of them bathe together, thinking it would be more fun that way. She suggested it so casually too. However, Inoa called her out for it because it might complicate things further. Suddenly, Tia approached and introduced herself to Romaria. Though Romaria was pretty weak, she mustered the courage to say that it was a pleasure to meet Tia. Suddenly, Inoa asked if there was somewhere nearby where Romaria could rest safely. Thankfully, Tia knew just the place. Not long after, she took them to a hidden cave, which was pretty spacious. Tia thought so too, and she shared that she usually used it to shelter from the rain. However, it was a bit too dark, so Inoa momentarily put Romaria down to summon a bunch of lanterns to appear. This brightened up the entire cave, much to Romaria's delight. The place is now Airbnb certified. Just then Inoa called Romaria and she immediately responded. Inoa guessed that she must be hungry, so he offered to prepare something. Romaria anxiously told him to stop and she insisted that she could eat insects and herbs around the area. That broke the wholesome vibe instantly. Wanting to ease her worries, Inoa revealed to her that he was also expelled from the Wishtar family. Romaria was stunned, and she couldn't believe it. Inoa, on the other hand, played it cool and encouraged her not to be so formal with him. Tia agreed with him, then without warning grabbed Romaria into her arms. She insisted that she stay on her lap despite Romaria's hesitation. Tia knew that Romaria had been through a rough time, but she reassured her that she would be fine now. Soon she would be able to eat something delicious as well. Seeing all this unfold, Inoa realized that Tia was treating Romaria like a domesticated cat. She adopted her instantly. Romaria, on the other hand, couldn't make sense of why they were doing all that for her. Meanwhile, Inoa thought about what to cook. If they wanted to regain strength, then the best option would be something nutritious and easy to digest, and so he went right into cooking that. First he boiled some water for the soup, then he took out the meat from the monster they defeated a moment ago. After that he sliced a bunch of vegetables and added them to the pot. Not long after it was finally done and it smelled very good. This lovely dish was called pork soup and it could help recover their HP by 500%, give them natural recovery by 50% for 5 minutes, and could even give them a 20% increase in defense for 30 minutes. Bro's cooking like a mobile game reward. Inoa immediately served the food to the girls, and he urged them to eat before it cooled down. Tia was excited upon seeing his cooking, and she praised him for it. Romaria, on the other hand, asked why they were all so kind to her. Both Inoa and Tia were stunned, and they asked what she was saying. Inoa then explained that if someone was in trouble, then it would only be normal to be kind to them. Tia asked if Romaria didn't know that, then she explained to her that although food tasted better if eaten alone, it tasted even better when shared with someone. When she ate with Inoa, she realized that again. However, Romaria was still confused, and she was unable to process that kindness was normal and that eating with someone made the food tastier. For a slave, it was an unknown world. No matter how much she cried or screamed, no one came to help her in the underground dungeon. They tortured her until Alan was satisfied. Her day-to-day life was eating miserable rations and then sleeping. She didn't feel alive, but she thought that was normal. Trauma rewired her expectations. Despite the awkwardness she felt, Romaria thanked Inoa for the food. Upon tasting his cooking, her eyes widened in shock. This was the first time that she had eaten something so delicious, and she felt like she had come back to life. Tia asked if it was that good, and she didn't waste time tasting it herself. Just then, Inoa said that he was glad if it made her cry with joy. Next time he would make it even better, so he advised Romaria to wait for it. Tears kept streaming down Romaria's face and she had nothing to say but thank him. That's not cooking, that's salvation. Using his camping skill, Inoa summoned a windscreen to make a partition for their bath. He explained to the girls that one side would be for them while the other was to be the men's side. Tia, however, didn't see the need to bathe separately, but Inoa insisted that they did. He knew that moral firewall was a must. Just then, Inoa summoned a magical barrel bath steam oasis, which amazed the girls. It had been so long since Romaria took a bath, so Tia urged her to get right into it together. Inoa got flustered as he had to remind them not to take their clothes off while he was there. After that, Inoa summoned a bunch of high-absorption towels, and he ensured they would be of top quality. He also got some pajamas with a body temperature regulation function and some amphibious underwear that automatically adjusts to the wearer's size, not the smart underwear patch. Taking out female underwear made Inoa feel guilty, but it wasn't like he had any bad intentions. Tia immediately brushed her face against the fluffy towel, while Romaria expressed her utmost thanks to Inoa. With everything prepared, Inoa told the girls to relax and take their time. The girls agreed with him, and they told him to relax as well. Inoa never expected to be able to get into a barrel bath in another world. Back then, he didn't have any free time, and the only thing he could do was watch videos. Just then he heard a scream, so he immediately went to the girls section asking if they were okay. However, he was surprised by what he saw. Romaria, who was now cleansed of all the filth on her body, was unrecognizable, and that's why we shouldn't underestimate the power of a bath. She got flustered by his sudden appearance, so she dove back into the barrel and caused a huge splash. Inoa apologized for his intrusion, but then he recognized the voice he just heard. It was Romaria. She apologized and explained that she just got carried away, but Inoa argued that he should be the one apologizing. Suddenly, he mentioned that all her wounds had disappeared. Tia then pointed out that when she entered the water, they disappeared instantly. She guessed it was the effect of Inoa's water skill, which somehow made sense to him as well. Romaria had already given up hope that those wounds would ever heal in her life. She cried tears of joy, thanking Inoa for his help. While still looking away, Inoa told her not to worry about it. The important thing was that her wounds healed. That mountain now has universal healthcare. According to his father, it was a useless skill, but in the end, getting his camp skill was the best decision. Just then, Tia expressed her amazement at his ability to create a healing bath. This made her so happy for Romaria. She then poked Romaria's skin, saying that it was so soft and fluffy. She also offered to take off her collar because it seemed to be bothering her. As Tia went on to compliment Romaria for her shiny hair and soft breasts, Inoa couldn't help but be mortified while listening. Girl-to-girl commentary went unhinged. Not being able to take it anymore, he ran out of the area and headed back to his bath. After that, the three of them took their time relaxing in the warm water. Inoa realized that this bath had skin regeneration, which was one of its effects. He thought it was amazing, especially since he could feel his fatigue fading away. Just then he had a realization, so he quickly got out of the bath. He headed to a barren space and there he summoned a barrel sauna to appear. His eyes lit up with excitement seeing that he could summon such a thing. He knew that something like that could cost a fortune. And so Inoa didn't waste a single second and he immediately tried it out. The inside smelled really good, like cypress. He took his time inside, soaking up the warmth of the sauna. Bro turned exile into vacation. When he finally finished, he headed to the next thing on his list, a cold water bath. He made sure to dip his foot first, but he still shivered when he submerged his entire body. After that, he summoned a bench, and he lay on it with ease. He let out a sigh of relief, basking in the feeling of complete relaxation. At that moment, Inoa reflected on past experiences. They evaluated his skill and then exiled him. This led him to meet Tia, and he even fought a cockatrice and met Romaria as well. So many things had happened, and he would have more experiences soon. On the next day, he vowed that he would calmly and freely continue living. Later on, Inoa joined the girls back at the camp. He was going to think about what to do, but Romaria suggested thinking about it tomorrow because it was already dark. Tia agreed, so Inoa decided to summon a tent for them. It was called the Weather Expert, and its effects included complete protection from weather and constant temperatures inside the tent. He also got a magic sleeping bag called Oversleep, which increases recovery speed for stamina and mana by 50%. It could even help the user recover from status ailments while in use. Bro's optimizing REM cycles. When Tia tried it out, she remarked that it was so fluffy and comfortable. Inoa agreed, and he also pointed out how spacious and cozy the tent was. With that, the three drifted off to sleep. Romeria was the first to get knocked out. Meanwhile, Inoa wanted to make the base even more impressive, even though it was already comfortable. Tia, on the other hand, was already excited about the food they would have tomorrow. The next morning, the sun shone brightly at Inoa's camp. As he was busy cooking, Tia checked in on the food, impatiently asking if it was ready yet. Inoa told her to wait a little longer, but Tia complained that she had no energy left due to her hunger. She wakes up hungry every arc. Then, out of nowhere, Tia sprang from her seat, urgently telling Inoa and Romeria to go to her side. The two immediately followed her command, and then, in a flash, a huge explosion occurred. Tia covered them in her arms, keeping them from harm's way. She asked Romeria and Inoa if they were okay and if they weren't hurt, and they reassured her they were fine. Suddenly, the culprit of the attack appeared, and Tia prepared herself for a potential fight. It was a huge dragon who seemed to know Tia, the white tiger. The dragon towered over Tia, fixing her with a menacing stare. She quietly muttered its name, Erasmus, and demanded to know what he wanted. Erasmus scoffed, saying he should be the one asking questions. He wondered why a stranger was camping on her territory. Tia shrugged and said that she was just resting a little. Besides, the mountains didn't belong to anyone. While they exchanged words, Inoa remained hidden inside the cave, cautiously peering out to understand what was happening. The sight of the enormous dragon stunned him, and he questioned whether Tia could truly defeat a creature like that. Acting quickly, he used his skill to check Tia's stats. To his surprise, she was a rank AAA. If it was above A, then that meant she was pretty strong. Reassured, he turned his attention to the dragon's stats, only to freeze when he saw that Erasmus was listed as rank C. That made no sense. The beast looked far too massive and powerful to be merely rank C. If Tia was rank AAA, then she should be able to defeat Erasmus without much trouble. Then his gaze shifted to the dragon's master. The name displayed made his heart drop. Alan Wishtall, his own father. Dad's really outsourcing villain work. Suddenly, Inoa and Romeria felt the presence of Erasmus strike them, causing them to freeze in shock. At that moment, Tia realized that the beast's true targets were her friends. Erasmus confirmed that she was right, and he added that they were offerings to him. He really thought he ordered takeout. Romeria panicked upon hearing that, and she wondered if she was about to be eaten. Tears streamed uncontrollably down her face, but Inoa grasped her hand firmly and urged her to calm down. He swore that he would never allow something like that to happen to her. Romeria could only stare at him, too overwhelmed to speak. Meanwhile, Tia asked Erasmus about the offering he mentioned, as she wasn't quite sure what he was talking about. Suddenly, she planted her palms firmly on the ground, preparing to attack. Erasmus would be a fool if he thought she would easily hand over the two. Erasmus, however, seemed entertained. He found it amusing that a tiny stray cat would dare challenge him. That disrespect is about to cost him. Just then, Tia bolted from the ground, propelling herself toward her gigantic foe. At the same time, Erasmus opened his mouth, releasing flames that hurled toward her. However, Tia narrowly avoided the attack and managed to land safely on the ground. Before she could plan her next attack, Erasmus slammed his tail, ready to crush Tia. Being as skilled as she was, she leapt into the air just in time to avoid the strike. Inoa watched everything unfold, and he was amazed that Tia was able to instantly dodge and leap out of the range of Erasmus's tail. The explosiveness and power of her legs were truly impressive. Meanwhile, Erasmus was infuriated that he missed. However, it didn't matter to him because he was sure that Tia wouldn't be able to dodge his attack in the air. Eager to win, he vowed that he would reduce Tia to ashes. Tia, on the other hand, seemingly used the air to propel herself and accelerate. She screamed as she bolted forward, which seemed to have caught Erasmus off guard. Feeling insulted, Erasmus announced that he was a dragon, so Tia shouldn't think that she could gain the upper hand in an aerial battle against him. Just then, he stomped his giant foot over Tia, desperate to prove his point. However, Tia only lifted his foot over her head, unwilling to be defeated. She casually bench-pressed a reptile. This infuriated Erasmus even further, and he vowed that he would crush her. Meanwhile, Inoa found the whole situation strange. Tia's rank was higher, and yet she was being overwhelmed. This made him wonder why she was struggling so much. Just then, he recalled that Tia mentioned being hungry, which hindered her from using her full strength. That realization stunned Inoa, as it all seemed like a big joke. However, that was the true reason behind her weakness, which seemed very typical of her. Not the final boss nerfed by hunger. True enough, Tia complained that she would have taken down Erasmus in one blow if only she had breakfast. Erasmus was offended by her comment, and he asked if she dared to make fun of him. Just then, he said that the game was over, but Tia only scoffed at what he said. He couldn't even beat her while she was hungry. Just then, Erasmus asked her if she was blind. Until that moment, he had only been using one paw. He held back for drama. Suddenly, Erasmus used both his hands to crush Tia into the ground. Romeria screamed in horror, while Inoa remarked that the situation was bad. Erasmus got fired up, and he hoped for Tia to finally die. In his desperation, the ground beneath him cracked under his immense power. Wanting to see the effects of his attack, he flew over the area to assess everything. To his surprise, he had created significant damage to the area below, which made him wonder if he had used too much strength. Assuming that he finally won over Tia, Erasmus erupted into a villainous laugh. However, his celebration ended sooner than he expected. Tia let out a smirk, apologizing to Erasmus for making him think for a moment that he had won. Erasmus acted as if he had seen a ghost, and he couldn't even process how she was still alive. He forgot that main characters don't die here. Tia, who was tightly holding Inoa in her arms, explained that it was thanks to the power of the bond between them. Inoa, on the other hand, begged her to let him go. Erasmus was puzzled about the power of the bond that Tia had mentioned, but he already had a guess. She made a contract of submission with an ordinary human. Tia proudly replied that being raised by a human was the best, especially since food would appear by itself. Tia really signed up for auto-delivery meals. Inoa was shocked by her choice of words, and he warned her to stop saying raised. Tia then explained that the contract of submission was a special contract, different from the usual kind, with two major effects. The servant cannot attack their master, and the master, by calling the servant's name, can summon them even if they are far away. Just then, Inoa asked Erasmus if he made a contract with Alan. Erasmus was surprised that he knew about it, but he confirmed Inoa's speculation. In exchange for allowing him to monopolize the resources of the mountain, he signed a contract to take as his own the children who were no longer useful, like Inoa. Inoa finally understood, and it made sense to him why Alan expelled him and Romeria instead of killing them. Dad said recycling program activated. It was so that this dragon could eat them. Suddenly, Erasmus licked his tongue in excitement, saying that human children have soft, tasty flesh. And above all, every time they saw him, they would let out such wonderful screams. While he listened to them, he tore off their hands and feet and ate them little by little. Their anger, their fear, their despair, just remembering the different expressions they showed as they died, made him feel an unparalleled delight. He really narrated his crimes like it's ASMR. Infuriated with all this brutality, Tia screamed that she wouldn't forgive him. Just then, she warned Inoa that she was about to attack Erasmus, but he didn't move. Erasmus was annoyed by the look on Inoa's face, and he asked how he dared show that. He asked Inoa if he was angry, but he didn't get a response. Just then, he announced that his appetite was gone, and he was reassured by the thought that offerings would come again soon. As for Inoa, he would burn him along with that whole area. Tia was shocked, and she asked if they should run. However, Inoa said no. He had an idea. Just then, he called Romeria to come to him, and she immediately ran over. Meanwhile, Erasmus told them that if they gathered together, the only thing that would happen was that they would burn to death. Suddenly, he opened his mouth to release a massive fireball. He called this the Infernal Flame Attack, and it disintegrated everything in its path. By the time the chaos died down, there was a huge crater on the ground reflecting the raw power of the mighty beast. He let out an exasperated cough, wondering if he finally defeated them this time. Just then, he laughed, thinking that this was what would happen to those who dared to challenge him. However, to his shock, something emerged from the smoke. It was Inoa. He wore a coat over him, and he was unscathed from the attack Erasmus had fired. Bro survived a nuke with outerwear. Suddenly, Inoa removed the coat, and he told Tia that they had to take down the dragon no matter what. Meanwhile, Erasmus was enraged that they were still alive. Romeria told Inoa that he was amazing for being completely able to block that attack. However, Inoa played it cool, as his own abilities surprised him as well. Erasmus, on the other hand, wondered who the hell the boy was. Moreover, he wondered what skill he had. Just then, Inoa called Tia, who was busy chewing on a massive pork rib. She has her priorities set. He told her that it was time to counterattack since Erasmus couldn't use fire. This puzzled Romeria, so he explained further that after using it the first time, he didn't use it again, even though he had a chance. He didn't know the reason, but he thought he couldn't use it repeatedly. Also, the wide-range flame from before must have drained a lot of his power. Romeria was amazed as his deduction was nothing short of amazing. Tia, on the other hand, smirked upon hearing Inoa's theory. She then popped her knuckles, asking Erasmus if he thought he could defeat the sacred beast now that she had recovered. She smiled sarcastically while Erasmus sneered at her. Knowing he was at the losing end, Erasmus abruptly flapped his wings, deciding to escape while he still could. He suddenly remembered an appointment. As he elevated into the air, he vowed that he would never forget the encounter. Tia was enraged that he was escaping, but all she could do was curse about it. Not long after, Erasmus was nothing but a small dot in the sky. He was already far away and Tia couldn't catch him even if she jumped. Inoa wondered if there was nothing they could do, and he hoped there was a way to stop him. Meanwhile, Erasmus proudly said that they were just simple ants crawling on the ground. He then told himself that he would make sure to remember that moment. He's talking trash from 10,000 feet. Then, just as he was about to escape, a rogue arrow shot through his right wing. Erasmus gasped in pain as he stared at the gaping hole in his body. Inoa, on the other hand, couldn't believe what he just saw. Suddenly, Tia reported that there was someone up the nearby tree, and it seemed to be in the direction from which the arrow came. Inoa immediately took a look, and he was shocked to know that the archer was an elven girl. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she vowed to take her revenge against Erasmus for burning her village. Get it, knockoff Legolas? Inoa was curious about the girl's identity, and he wondered if she was helping them. Just then, the girl fired 3 consecutive shots, aiming them at Erasmus's wing. Being a skilled archer, she managed to hit her target, making the dragon scream in agony, not her turning him into a pincushion. Inoa was relieved that they managed to stop Erasmus, but they needed to come up with a plan before the girl ran out of arrows. Just then, Romeria called out to him, suggesting that she act as bait. Maybe then Erasmus would take the hook. However, Inoa was against the idea, thinking that it would be way too dangerous. Suddenly, he thought of something as he reflected on the words hook and bait. Just then, he summoned those items using his skill. Out came the legendary fishing rod Grounder, which features a reel with an auto-winding function, a line capable of handling several thousand tons, and a hook that the prey could never escape from. It was designed to cast precisely to the exact spot that he wanted. With that, Inoa planned to catch a dragon. This turned into Animal Crossing real quick, and so he swung the fishing rod in the air and hurled the hook forward, hoping that it would tug tightly at the mighty beast. Thankfully, he succeeded in his initial plan, and it actually caught Erasmus's attention. Inoa thought it was good, especially since the dragon took the bait. Meanwhile, Erasmus tried to take the hook off, but it wouldn't let go. Inoa desperately tried to pull on the rod despite its immense weight. Then he called on Tia to use the fishing line as a path. Tia's eyes lit up as she had just realized what the entire thing was for. Until she could reach it, Inoa told himself that he wouldn't let go. Seeing him struggle, Romeria hugged Inoa from behind to help him pull. To their surprise, the archer from earlier came running forward, offering to help as well. With that, Inoa instructed the girls to help him pull in a synchronized manner, Erasmus losing to friendship and physics. Meanwhile, Erasmus was puzzled as to why he was being dragged by mere humans. Tia, on the other hand, made sure that Inoa and everyone's efforts wouldn't be in vain. Using the sacred techniques Heaven's Thunderclaw, she attacked Erasmus as soon as she secured the distance between them. That move's name is longer than his lifespan. The mighty dragon screamed in pain and he succumbed to his injuries and fell from the skies. When he landed below, the ground quaked and shattered, bearing witness to Erasmus's defeat. As his body lay motionless on the ground, Tia happily announced to Inoa that they'd finally done it. Inoa laughed nervously, though he had already expected Tia to succeed. Although he did wish she'd stop calling him master, Romeria also celebrated with them, and she happily told Inoa that they did it. At that moment, Inoa realized that Tia still defeated Erasmus even though she was exhausted. Also, she skipped breakfast, so she shouldn't have any status buffs. He checked the stats himself to be sure. But to his shock, the barrel sauna had more benefits than he thought. It only had 1 hour left of its effectiveness, but it increased all his stats by 300%. He finally realized that yesterday's sauna had a buff effect. Until now, buffs were increased by 10-30%, but these numbers were on another level. He won because he moisturized. Suddenly, Inoa's attention shifted to the archer from earlier, who was now crying out of nowhere. As he wondered why she was weeping, Tia teased him for making another girl cry. He immediately apologized to the girl, but to his surprise, she thanked him. If it weren't for him, she could never have defeated Erasmus. Inoa was stunned, but then his expression softened into a smile. He put his hand on the girl's shoulder, telling her that he felt the same and that he was grateful to her. If she hadn't stopped Erasmus, he would have gotten away. Tia chimed in and said it was true, and she also found it amazing how she hit attacks from a distance. Suddenly, Romeria remembered that she hugged Inoa, so she immediately apologized for it. She slammed her head into the ground in apology, but Inoa reminded her not to worry. Someone please give her a therapy arc. Just then, Inoa asked the girl for her name, but before she could reveal what it was, the sound of Tia's grumbling stomach disturbed their conversation. She sheepishly told them to leave the details for later and suggested that they eat together first. Inoa laughed and agreed with the idea, and then he asked what they should eat. Tia was surprised, but then she suggested something wild, eating Erasmus. She said revenge is edible. Hidden deep in the dungeons, Alan forced one of his prisoners to reveal where his daughter was. He whipped the elven man, relentlessly attacking him without mercy. Bro's really running evil ink from a basement. When the elf refused to speak, Alan furiously asked if he would keep his mouth shut. The rest of the captured elves could only watch as their comrade was being tortured. as they too were helpless and in chains. Suddenly, the elven man crashed onto the floor, collapsing from exhaustion. Alan merely scoffed, calling him an idiot. He still couldn't believe that Erasmus burned down the elven village, only to let the best product escape in the end. Still, he felt quite reassured because he still had Erasmus, which meant there were still other ways to make money. Suddenly, Alan burst into a villainous laugh, wondering which place he should have his dragon burned down next. Unbeknownst to him, his beloved Erasmus was being grilled nicely. He went from menace to medium rare. Despite Tia's excitement, Inoa explained to her that it still needed a little more before it got fully cooked. She argued that she could eat it raw if she wanted, which didn't surprise Inoa because she was a tiger after all. And so, he patiently cooked the skewers as the girls drooled over their scrumptious scent. As he worked on the food, he asked the elven girl for her name, which she revealed to be Fairy. Suddenly, Romaria took Fairy's hand, telling her that it was nice to meet her. Fairy was surprised, but she returned the favor. She was shaking when Romaria touched her, so she quickly apologized for it and explained that it was the first time she had left the village. Just then, Tia asked if she was from the elven tribe, specifically the eastern elven village Kairis. Fairy confirmed that she was right, but then she revealed that her village had been burned down by Erasmus. 3 days ago, in the elven village of Kairis, Fairy, the princess, was informed that they were under attack. The royal guard advised her to escape immediately through the back gate. Fairy was shocked by the news, but she was adamant about leaving because she wanted to fight alongside her people. However, the royal guard told her that he would only say it once more. She had to escape. He reminded her that they had the duty to put the princess's life above all else. Fairy wanted to plead her case, but she was stunned into silence when the royal guard kneeled before her. He promised that they would drive out the intruder quickly and then follow her, and he told her to wait at the forest lake. Having no other choice, Fairy simply muttered the royal guard's name, Fred. After that, she immediately ran for her life, vowing that she would wait for him. As she neared the forest lake, she wondered who would be attacking them. Just then, she was forced to a halt when she heard disturbing noises nearby. Her eyes widened in pure horror. The village she once grew up in was now engulfed in fire, and it was all caused by a giant dragon. It didn't take long for the entire village to be reduced to ashes, and the dragon left shortly after. Fairy wondered what to do, seeing that the village was being burned down by the dragon. She knew she had to help, but if she went back, she would only be a burden. Just then, she remembered Fred, and she was reminded that at times like those, she must stay calm. And so, Fairy lifted her head, telling herself that she had to trust and wait. That night, the skies cried along with Fairy, whose heart was aching at the thought of everyone she knew in that village. Nature's supporting the character development. The very next day, she went back to her village but found no survivors. Seeing the aftermath of the dragon's brutality, Fairy declared that she was the princess of Kairis, and to the enemies of her people she would give vengeance. That brought Fairy to where she was that day. While she was chasing the dragon, she found Inoa and the others fighting against it. At that moment, Inoa realized that even if Tia struggled with him, the elves attacked by Erasmus must already be dead. Suddenly, Tia asked Fairy if it was possible that her companions were still alive. This surprised Fairy, so Tia explained further that elves were beautiful in appearance, which made them valuable. Inoa also realized that if Erasmus's actions were under Alan's orders, then it was very possible that he captured the elves and kept them as merchandise. Alan's running medieval black market eBay. Now that Romaria thought about it, when they were taking her to the mountain, she saw some beautiful people with pointy ears. They must still be alive. Inoa suggested that they rescue the elves and help Fairy, to which Tia agreed. She was eager to cooperate since she also wanted to give Alan what he deserved. Suddenly, Fairy thanked them and she cried as she expressed her gratitude. It was decided, but for now they recovered their strength with some food. The skewers from the dark dragon were finally cooked and they looked scrumptious. Tia's eyes sparkled as she held the skewers and she thanked everyone for the food before digging in. As soon as she took a bite, the flavors burst inside her mouth. Romaria and Fairy quickly tasted it for themselves, and as expected, it was very tasty. Inoa also took a bite, and he was amazed by the flavor that he had never tasted before. He quickly looked into its effects, and it wasn't bad at all. The evil dragon meat skewer increased their vitality limit, attack power, and defense power by 10%. It also increased their fire resistance by 80% and gave them 10% auto regeneration, which could last up to 30 minutes. On top of that, it slowed their mana consumption by 15% for 20 minutes. The first time they ate the pot and the whole roast, the boost applied to the meal as a whole. However, evil dragon meat gave this boost per skewer, so the cost benefit was unmatched. Bro's reading nutrition facts like it's a spellbook. Inoa knew that if they were going to fight Alan, they had to eat plenty and grow stronger. He quickly gobbled up a weird part of the skewer to grow stronger, but to his shock, his skill leveled up to 2. He couldn't believe it. He suspected that the skill was already strong on its own, but he didn't expect it to evolve. He ate mystery meat and evolved. As Tia enjoyed the rest of the skewers, she noticed that something seemed to distract Inoa, so she asked what was wrong. Inoa didn't answer, and instead he told the girls to stay away from him and not move. The girls followed his orders and they stood still and watched. Meanwhile, Inoa clasped his hands together, trying to summon something using his skill. It looked like it was going to take some time to appear, and he suspected that it was because of its complicated structure. Then, out of nowhere, a wooden cabin appeared out of thin air and landed on the open space before him. That's not a skill. That's a housing market cheat code. As could be expected, the girls were stunned. Tia was shocked that he built a house, while Romeria simply said that he was amazing. Meanwhile, Fairy thought that with his power she could rebuild Kyrus right away. She saw one cabin and said urban development arc. However, Inoa was just as surprised as they were because he didn't know this was the potential of level 2. He quickly shrugged it off and suggested that they go inside to see it. As soon as they entered the cabin, they were instantly filled with awe. It was fully furnished with new items, and it even had a high ceiling, huge windows, and a wooden stove. Every little detail Inoa had in mind had been included, making it the perfect wooden cabin. Tia immediately checked out every corner she could find, and her first victim was the refrigerator. The box intrigued her, and she was surprised to see that it was freezing inside. Fairy, on the other hand, aimed her arrow at the fridge and warned the girls to step back. She suspected it was some kind of ice attribute monster, so Inoa informed her that it wasn't. Imagine explaining electricity to them. Inoa continued to explore the cabin and he found that it was complete with an induction stove, a refrigerator, and a microwave oven. All the appliances were top-notch, high-end models. The thought surprised him and he wondered how they could even get electricity to work. Meanwhile, Tia found an interesting room and she wondered what it was supposed to be. It turned out that she was referring to the bathroom, which was sparkling in all its glory. Tia thought it was amazing and huge and she wanted to get in already. Romeria mentioned that it smelled like fresh wood, while Fairy remarked that it gave her such a calming feeling. Suddenly, Tia took her top off, urging the others to get in together because they just sweated a lot after that fight. That tiger has no shame stat. However, Inoa stopped her because he hadn't filled the tub with water yet. In the end, the wooden cabin was still just a house, so the water that came out was only normal tap water, though he didn't have any idea what made it have plumbing. Suddenly, he thought about summoning a magic steam drum bath called Oasis, some wood, rope, and a chisel. First, he carved a notch at the top of the wood and he fit a small steam oasis inside. He fastened it with a rope and soon enough the flowing hot spring bath was complete. When Inoa finally saw it function, he realized that it kind of gave an industrial wastewater vibe, but still, it was amazing. It didn't look that nice though. Because of that, he took another piece of wood and carved it with the chisel. He created a tiger's head out of it, which surprised Tia because it looked like her. When he placed it on top of the drum, Tia quickly pointed out that it looked like it was puking transparent gel. Inoa wasn't amused, so he told her not to say puking. She violated that sculpture instantly. He wondered if it didn't look good, but Romeria and Fairy reassured him that it did and that the tiger's face was cute. Based on the look on Tia's face, it seemed like she was happy. Just then, Tia took off her clothes, urging the others to get in. Inoa freaked out and he reminded her to undress after he left. When he finally went away, the girls took their time to relax in the bath. Not long after, they approached Inoa and apologized for the delay. They were clad in new clothes and they seemed refreshed. Then out of nowhere, Romeria slammed her head on the ground, apologizing for getting in before him. However, Inoa told her it was fine and that she should just be careful with her head. Meanwhile, Fairy mentioned that the bath felt amazing. Even her damaged hair became soft and silky. Hearing that, Inoa replied that he was glad for her. Just then, he brought up how the girls made lots of noises, so he asked if they got hurt. Tia immediately said that it was nothing, but sadly for her, Romeria revealed that Tia suddenly took the form of a tiger. Since it was the first time she and Fairy had seen it, they were shocked. Fairy also added that Tia started imitating the wooden figure and splashing them with hot water. Not her role-playing mid-bath. Hearing all that, Inoa told Tia that it was dangerous to joke around in the bath. Tia apologized for what she had done, but even so, she thought it was fun seeing so many different expressions from the two girls. She even told Inoa that he should have joined. Inoa, on the other hand, argued that he wouldn't even dare. Now that Tia thought about it, she wondered what those hot rooms and cold water tubs were. Inoa realized that they didn't know what a sauna was, so he explained to them that it was for one of his hobbies. Romeria froze when he said that, thinking that it was like fire and water torture. Suddenly, she screamed her speculation. Inoa's hobby was some kind of self-torture. Medieval minds cannot process wellness culture. Inoa frantically said that it was a misunderstanding, but Tia was already convinced that he enjoyed suffering. She thought it was weird, but Inoa tried to explain that he didn't enjoy it at all. Suddenly, Fairy told him that if that was what he wanted, then he could have asked her for help. The way that sounded is crazy. Later that day, Inoa sought refuge in the sauna. As he soaked up the warmth, he recalled how the others ended up seeing him as some kind of weirdo. This made him think that next time, he would make all three of them experience how good a sauna was, which was also essential in clearing up the misunderstanding. After warming up in the sauna, Inoa put on a fresh set of clothes and dried himself off. Then, as he basked in how good the feeling was, he noticed that Fairy and Romaria weren't in the cabin. Tia, who had been waiting in the living room, explained to him that they had fallen asleep from exhaustion, so she carried them to bed. Inoa understood and he thanked her for it. Just then, Tia fell silent. Then she mentioned what Fairy had said earlier. Something came back to her, so Inoa asked what it was. Suddenly, Tia revealed that her mother was sealed away by the Demon King. That plot twist came out of nowhere. Unable to believe what he had just heard, Inoa asked Tia if her mother had truly been sealed away by the Demon King. Tia didn't answer immediately. Instead, her mind retreated into the shadows of the past. Inoa recalled that Camila had once told him about the Demon King, the king of monsters who was born only once every 100 years. Curious, Inoa asked why her mother had been sealed away. Tia explained that it was because she had been protecting humans, and she supposed that, to the Demon King, her mother was just a nuisance. Tia's mom really caught a 100-year ban for griefing the server. Inoa asked if she wasn't thinking about rescuing her or if she knew where she was sealed. Tia answered that she knew where, and she had even thought about saving her. However, she believed it was impossible. Seeing the confusion on Inoa's face, Tia revealed that the place where her mother was sealed was the Abyss Dungeon. Inoa seemed unfamiliar with the location, so Tia explained that it was the most difficult dungeon of all. No one had managed to conquer it yet. Hearing that surprised Inoa, as it finally confirmed that there truly were dungeons in that world. Inoa started shaking, unable to contain the excitement he felt. Is he excited, or did the dragon bone broth finally hit his nervous system? Since his reincarnation, Inoa had only been to the mansion and the mountain, so he longed for something that truly felt otherworldly. Suddenly, Tia shared that in the Abyss Dungeon the monsters were incredibly strong and there were powerful traps everywhere. But the most terrifying thing was the environment. There were violent thunderstorms, vast seas of poison, areas where even standing on solid ground made it impossible to breathe, and zones where gravity became so intense that movement was nearly impossible. These extreme conditions constantly assaulted anyone who dared to enter. Even if someone managed to defeat the monsters and avoid the traps, the environment alone would eventually overwhelm them. In the end, everyone who entered died there. Inoa shivered just thinking about it. That was precisely why Tia couldn't rescue her mother. She needed a power that could survive in such an extreme environment. Hearing that, Inoa realized something. He looked at his palm, wondering if his skill was perfect for the conditions Tia had mentioned. Suddenly, he yelled Tia's name, shocking her. He told her that they were going to rescue her mother, which caught her by surprise. She asked if he hadn't heard what she just said, that it was impossible. Inoa cut her off, admitting he knew it was impossible. However, if they kept getting stronger and combined his skill with her power, it might just work. Tia gasped in surprise, realizing he was right. With Inoa's camping skill, it might actually be possible. Imagine being a literal demon king and getting defeated by a guy with a North Face tent and a Coleman stove. Inoa confirmed that was exactly what he thought. If he raised the level of his skill, he was sure he would be able to summon much more powerful items. With those, he could create camp items so strong they could withstand the Abyss Dungeon's environment. Meanwhile, Tia thought that if she went with Inoa, she could surely save her mom. She stood on top of the sofa, announcing that they would eat a lot, get stronger, and then rescue her mother. She then turned away from Inoa, trying to hide that she was crying. She thanked him, and Inoa simply smiled and acknowledged it. Tia quickly wiped her tears and asked Inoa to cook her something before they went to sleep. Then, to her shock, Inoa collapsed into her breasts. She was confused for a moment until she realized he was already asleep. Tia smiled, whispering goodnight to him. I've seen this anime 40 times and I'm watching it again right now. The next morning, Inoa slowly fluttered his eyes open, realizing he had fallen asleep without noticing. He wondered if Tia had carried him to his bed, as he could feel her warm hand. Just then he turned to his side and what he found horrified him. His hand was buried deep between Tia's massive breasts. He fluttered his eyes open and immediately wished he'd stayed blind. To make matters worse, Romaria and Fairy were sleeping soundly next to him. He froze as he realized they were all sleeping in the same bed. Mortified, Inoa let out a deafening scream that shook the entire cabin. At that moment he realized he couldn't let his guard down even for a second and decided to avoid falling asleep like that again. Suddenly, Romaria called to him, asking him to take a look at the vegetables she had prepared. Inoa thanked her and complimented her great work. Romaria suddenly slammed her head on the ground, saying it was an honor for her. A compliment? Time to test the structural integrity of my skull. Inoa felt a bit embarrassed, so he told her to leave the rest to him while she sat and relaxed. After that, Inoa prepared a pot for the meal. First, he prepared a broth with the bones of the evil dragon. Meanwhile, he sautéed the finely chopped vegetables in butter. Once they turned slightly golden, he took them out and seared the dragon meat until browned. He added the sautéed vegetables and the broth, letting it simmer until the meat turned tender. Finally, he added milk and cream and brought it to a light boil. He seasoned it with salt and pepper, then finished it off by sprinkling some herbs that grew on the mountain. Not long after, he was finally done. There was also baguette and fruit gathered from the mountain. Inoa called this dish Erasmus's chowder, which increases vitality limits by 50 points. It also increases attack and defense by 50 points and offers fire resistance of 90% for 4 hours. On top of that, it provided Earth HP auto-generation of 40% for 30 minutes. Forget protein shakes, I need that dragon bone broth to finish my 9 to 5. Afterward, the group sat down to enjoy the meal. As soon as Inoa took a bite, he immediately felt relaxed by the delicious taste. Romaria remarked that it was perfect for breakfast, while Fairy said it warmed her up. Taya, on the other hand, had already finished her portion and was asking for more. After the meal, Inoa suggested they devise a plan to rescue the elves from Alan. Taya raised her hand, claiming she had a plan. They would sneak into Alan's mansion, capture him, punish him, and then rescue the elves. Taya's brain cells are fighting for third place. Fairy was unamused, but Romaria seemed amazed by her boldness. Inoa simply laughed nervously, knowing it wouldn't work. Attacking head-on was risky, so he suggested prioritizing the rescue of the elves. To start, slavery shouldn't even exist in the kingdom of Valis. With just one person like Romaria, perhaps it could be concealed, but if they brought many elves with them during the 8 Nations inspection, it would raise suspicions. Inoa turned to Romaria, asking her if she had been outside the kingdom of Valis before she reached the mountain. She believed so and thought she had been transported from beneath the mansion. Inoa asked if she knew exactly where, but she was sorry to say she didn't. She had been too shaken up at the time. Romaria froze as she recalled the traumatic event, so Inoa immediately apologized for making her remember something so painful. Inoa, where did you come from? Romaria, the depths of despair, take a left at the trauma center. Inoa then announced that the best course of action was to go to the kingdom of Valis and gather information. Hearing that they were going to the city, Tia quickly got excited. Though it was a little scary for Romaria, she agreed to go wherever Inoa went. Fairy confessed that this would be her first time going to a human city. Because of that, Inoa suggested she hide her ears. Suddenly, he proposed that they all change clothes. Because looking fire is more important than the actual mission. The girls immediately got dressed, and soon after they revealed their brand new outfits to Inoa. Inoa complimented the girls, telling them they looked incredibly adorable in their new clothes. At the back of his mind, he felt relieved that he could now generate normal clothes since his skill level had gone up. Truly, it was an all-purpose skill. Just then, Tia started stretching her muscles. Inoa asked how the clothes felt, and she replied that they were comfy and allowed her to move easily. However, she mentioned she would have liked something with less fabric. After all, she didn't like wearing clothes. When the gym rat refuses to wear anything but a stringer tank top. Meanwhile, Romaria felt uneasy wearing such wonderful garments and asked Inoa if she could really keep them. Inoa reassured her that she should, as they looked amazing on her. Tia, wanting to be complimented as well, modeled her outfit and asked for Inoa's opinion. Inoa became embarrassed and simply confirmed that they looked fine. Suddenly, Romaria felt self-conscious, thinking it was such an honor. Normally, she noted, even the tiniest scrap of cloth would have been enough for her. Inoa was bewildered by her statement and asked what she meant by that. She's literally just happy to have sleeves. The bar is in the basement. Just then, Fairy told everyone that until that moment she had only ever worn the traditional garments of elves. Because of that, she was happy to wear something different for the first time. Inoa was glad she liked it and complimented her, saying she looked amazing. Tia wasn't one to stay on the sidelines, so she quickly pointed out that her clothes were tight. She fluttered her chest open, asking how they looked. Inoa was unamused and told her it would be easier on the eyes if her clothes were a little looser. Inoa's eyes are doing parkour, trying to look anywhere else. Next, he asked Fairy if all elf women wore the same outfit as her. Fairy explained that the outfit was passed down from princess to princess, so only she could wear it. Imagine being a princess and your only inheritance is a damp dress your great-great-grandma wore to a war. She then mentioned the outfits she had seen other people wear, wondering if that was truly the fashion of this world. Realizing he hadn't been paying enough attention to her, Tia screamed at Inoa, demanding to know how her clothes looked. Inoa accidentally gazed at her breasts, which appeared very prominent in her new outfit. Distressed by the situation, Inoa yelled that they were fine before running away in a hurry. Tia asked him to wait, but he reasoned that he had to go to the bathroom. He ran so fast he probably broke the Inoa Tech's wind resistance barrier. Tia was saddened by the interaction and fell quiet. After that, Inoa went to change his own clothes. With everything settled, he suggested they take off. Tia pointed out that he had changed too and teased that he looked fine. Inoa explained that it was better for him to change so the Wishtal family members wouldn't recognize him. Tia gave him a menacing look that haunted him, making him worriedly ask why she was making that face. That's not a look, that's a pre-ordered funeral service. Frey thought Inoa's clothes looked a bit childish, but Inoa argued it was only natural since he actually was a kid, at least in appearance. Romaria, on the other hand, suggested they shouldn't underestimate Inoa's clothing despite its simple look. Inoa shared that his shirt and trousers were made of a special material called Inortex. It was super light with high durability and elasticity, regulated body temperature, and featured wind resistance, water resistance, breathability, and heat resistance. It adapted to different climates and situations. On top of that, the design was minimalist yet functional. Actually, everyone's clothes were made of Enortex, and he wanted them all to experience how amazing it was. Enortex, more like Enor Flex on these medieval peasants. As Enor continued to ramble about the clothing, Romaria mentioned how meticulous he was, while Tia thought he could be a bit much sometimes. The group finally started their journey. As they ventured into the forest, Enor asked the girls if they were tired. Romaria said no, crediting the incredible shoes she was wearing. Fairy agreed, pointing out the shoes' fluffy cotton-like feeling that made them comfortable to walk in. Inoa was glad to hear it, though he had expected as much from shoes with a fatigue reduction effect. When Inoa turned to Tia, he was shocked to see her looking frustrated. He asked what was wrong, but she refused to admit anything. Then, to his surprise, Tia lunged into the air and landed on his back as if she wanted a piggyback ride. She's a giant tiger princess and she's out here acting like a tactical backpack. She complained that she was tired and wanted him to carry her. Inoa was a bit annoyed and asked what was wrong with her, but he quickly noticed she felt surprisingly light. He suspected the food had boosted his physical abilities. If this continued, he might eventually be strong enough to carry everyone while moving. Inoa then realized that if Tia turned into a tiger and carried them all, they would move much faster. Man really looked at his friend and saw a 5-star Uber rating. Romaria was stunned by the idea because she wanted a ride from a tiger. Fairy admitted it was a good idea, but worried it would be too much for Tia. Tia groaned in frustration, saying she wanted to walk like everyone else, but Inoa pointed out that she wasn't even walking at the moment. As the journey continued, Inoa mentioned she had been acting strange. Finally, her cheeks flushed red and she confessed that she was also a girl. She really had to drop a biological fact just to get a compliment. The bar is in hell. Inoa looked at her with confusion, which made Tia more self-conscious. When he turned away as if it didn't matter, Tia got annoyed and called him an insensitive idiot. She started strangling him in frustration, causing the other girls to warn them to be careful. Having had enough of Inoa's insensitivity, Tia finally explained that she also wanted him to tell her that her clothes looked good and to worry if she was tired. Inoa, surprised by the confession, explained his reasons. He told her that if he commented too much on how her clothes looked, it might be considered sexual harassment. Tia had no idea what that was, and asked if it was something she could eat. Inoa trying to explain HR policy to a tiger girl is the peak of comedy. Inoa continued, saying he knew Tia wouldn't get tired from a simple walk. He trusted her and her strength, which was why he didn't ask. Inoa's words rang through Tia's mind, leaving her dazed. Inoa apologized for bothering her, but she didn't seem as bummed as before. With a cheerful tone, she told everyone they would get to the city in time if she ran seriously as a tiger. Inoa was stunned by the sudden shift, realizing she had just been in a bad mood earlier. At that moment, he realized that no matter the world, women were truly complicated. Women aren't complicated, Inoa. You just have the social awareness of a potato. Tia transformed into her tiger form and urged everyone to hop on. Not long after, they finally reached the kingdom of Valis. Inoa was in awe. It was his first time seeing a city in this world. Fairy was amazed by the thriving city and the crowds of people. Fairy is looking at the crowd like she just opened 400 tabs on a laptop with 2 GB of RAM. Tia then told the others that if they wanted to gather information, they should head to a place she knew, the Adventurers Guild. As the group headed to the guild, Tia found herself distracted by the sight of delicious food. Inoa asked what she was doing and reminded her that they had to go to the guild first. Suddenly, Tia took a piece of meat from one of the stalls, thanking the vendor for the food. However, the vendor quickly pointed out that she hadn't paid yet. On top of that, she couldn't eat the meat raw. Money is just a social construct that Tia refuses to acknowledge. After settling the commotion caused by Tia, the group finally arrived at the Adventurers Guild. As they stared at the building, Inoa couldn't help but feel nervous. Finally, they mustered the courage to enter. To Inoa's surprise, the whole place was bustling with life, filled with adventurers left and right. Adventurers were chatting over pints of ale, and others were looking at quests pinned to the board. His entry was immediately noticed. One of the men warned that it wasn't a place for kids. Some of the adventurers called out to the girls in Inoa's group, asking them to come over for a drink. However, the adventurer's companion only laughed, thinking a kid wouldn't understand how delicious liquor was. Another adventurer teased Inoa and the others, calling them kids who should go home and drink their mommy's milk. In no time, the entire guild was mocking Inoa and his group, and they quickly felt overwhelmed. They're laughing now, but they're about to be featured in Inoa's next soup base. Fairy was unfazed, but she pointed out that the men were making fun of them. Tia, on the other hand, started to growl in frustration. Inoa stopped her, reminding her that she had to hold it in, although he understood how she felt. If they made a scene, it might reach Alan's ears. Just then, an adventurer dressed in fine armor pointed at Romaria, calling her a black-haired girl. Romaria shivered in fear as the adventurer recalled that she had been a slave of the Wishtal family. He's dressed like a hero but talks like a middle school bully on Xbox Live. He asked what she was doing there, then mentioned how useful she had been back when she was a slave. Hearing all of this caused Romaria's repressed memories to resurface, making her freeze on the spot. Having had enough of the adventurer's disrespect, Fairy and Anoa shielded Romaria. She muttered their names in concern, worried about what might happen next. The adventurer mockingly asked Anoa and Fairy if they were upset. Meanwhile, Anoa analyzed the man's demeanor and manner of speaking. Without a doubt, this guy had the information they wanted. Then out of nowhere, Tia appeared in front of the adventurer in a flash. With lightning manifesting throughout her body, she told him that he had been rambling for a while now. She's not just a tiger, she's a literal Pikachu with anger issues. Still, the adventurer stood there nonchalantly, seemingly unbothered by Tia. Suddenly, Tia pointed at him with conviction, asking who the hell he was. The onlookers were stunned, their eyes widening with curiosity over what was about to unfold. The other adventurers then told the group that the man they were messing with was Dominic, a D-rank adventurer from the guild. Dominic took pity on the kids before him and told them to go home before they got hurt. He chuckled, saying they simply didn't know him well yet. Then his gaze turned serious, and he demanded that Romaria answer his question. Why was a slave at the guild? Anoa and the rest of the group refused to answer, but their stares were deadly. Anoa quickly glanced at Romaria and thought that for her sake they should maybe back off for now. Anoa acted innocent, saying he didn't know what Dominic meant. He suggested there must be a mistake, but Dominic cut him off, saying there was no mistake. Romaria had the same smell. Anoa was stunned. Dominic pointed at his nose, boasting that he had a skill called Super Smell. This allowed him to precisely identify any scent he had picked up before. Bro, that's not a skill, that's just being a creep with a sinus problem. Because of that, he confirmed the filthy brat was definitely the same slave. Anoa cursed in his head, knowing it was a very convenient skill. By the looks of it, there was no way to hide Romaria's true identity. Suddenly, Dominic remembered that the slave girl used to be covered in wounds, but she had somehow become beautiful. He looked at Tia and Fairy and with a twisted appreciation said they looked pretty good. His tongue trailed over his teeth, claiming he could play with all three of them right then and there. Someone get this man some toothpaste and a restraining order. The group stood frozen, their faces etched with horror and fury. The air crackled around Tia and Fairy, who were struggling to contain the impulse to strike. However, the order came sharp and heavy and Anoa wanted to leave. The tension was thick, but the girls had no choice but to swallow their pride. Anoa bowed his head as he walked away, knowing it wasn't the time to face Dominic. He called for Tia to follow him while she regretfully clenched her hand in frustration. Behind them, Dominic watched their retreating backs with a bored, dismissive sigh. He suddenly began to reminisce aloud, mentioning how fun it had been back then. He described how every time he pressed a cigar to Romaria's face, she cried and begged for forgiveness. He would stomp on her head and laugh with Alan. Just remembering it got him excited. He said the face of utter despair was the best and he wanted to see it again. He's talking like he's describing a fun weekend at Disneyland, but it's just war crimes. As he spoke, the memory of that trauma flashed vividly before Romaria's eyes, making her tear up uncontrollably. Anoa stood in silence as he listened to Dominic's cruel story. Then he turned around and walked back toward him. With a smug grin, Dominic asked Anoa if he had forgotten something. Just then, the question died in his throat. In a flash of violent motion, the distance between them vanished. A fist, driven by fury, cut through the atmosphere and landed on Dominic's face. The environment itself seemed to recoil. Dominic slammed into the wall with a force that rattled the very foundations of the guild. That punch was so loud it woke up the Demon King 3 chapters early. Silence followed the roar of the impact. Everyone's jaws hit the floor, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Even the girls could only stare, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. Standing amidst the settling dust, Anoa stood still. He apologized to his companions because he was the one who had told them to leave it alone. He kept his hand clenched tightly, saying he simply couldn't hold back. The adventurers were filled with shock and confusion, seeing their beloved Dominic fly through the air. They couldn't help but wonder what kind of strength Anoa possessed. Meanwhile, Anoa felt relieved that he had visited the sauna before going to the guild. Suddenly, the girls called out to him, making him freeze in horror. Tia and Fairy stared at him like two ominous figures, recalling how he had said they were supposed to avoid causing trouble. He was the one who had given that order, yet he was the first to go against his own words. The silence in this scene is louder than the punch that started it. Anoa was terrified by their taunting, so he once again apologized. He explained that he simply couldn't forgive Dominic for what he had done. Romaria was touched by his words, though she could only mutter his name. Just then Tia punched the air enthusiastically and said whatever. She added that if Dominic had tried to get any closer, she would have hit him herself. Romaria tried her best to speak, reassuring the others that they shouldn't worry because she was fine. However, her constant trembling seemed to contradict everything she said. Anoa then told Fairy to take care of Romaria, and she gladly took on the responsibility. Just then Dominic emerged from the rubble, injured yet fueled by the humiliating incident. He didn't know who Anoa was or where he had come from, but he certainly hoped the boy was ready to die. However, before things could escalate, a man from upstairs screamed that it was enough. Everyone immediately looked up, curious about the man's identity. Out of nowhere, the man leapt from the second floor into the space between Anoa and Dominic. Why use the stairs when you can risk your knees for the aesthetic? The crowd's reaction answered Anoa's silent question. This was the guildmaster, Rod Macbeth. Inoa was stunned, knowing the guildmaster was the one in charge of the entire place. Rod warned them that if they were going to fight, they should do it in the combat arena. Dominic's eyes lit up with thrill and he agreed immediately. He was eager to get started, predicting how much fun it would be. He then cried out to Inoa, calling him a brat, and challenged him to a duel in the arena located at the back of the reception. Dominic clutched his injured cheek, excitedly thinking that Inoa wouldn't get away. He vowed that he would return the pain 100-fold. Inoa, on the other hand, only stared at Dominic, who was acting like a complete psycho. Tia asked Inoa to let her fight Dominic instead, as she was certain she could finish him in an instant. However, Inoa said it was fine because he was the one who had interfered. Tia was visibly worried, but Inoa reassured her, asking her to let her master handle it. On the sidelines, Tia fiercely screamed for Inoa to beat him up. Meanwhile, the adventurers started placing bets on Dominic, with some wagering 50,000 to 80,000 souls. Some encouraged others to bet on the brat as well, noting there would be no point in betting if they didn't have an opponent to bet against. To make it more interesting, they even started betting on how many minutes it would take for Dominic to defeat Inoa. Hearing them belittle her master made Tia's blood boil. Dominic's fan club is about to experience a massive market crash. In the arena, Dominic mentioned how naive the people around them were. From that earlier strike, it was already obvious to him that Inoa wasn't weak. Because of that, he wouldn't underestimate the boy. Instead, he intended to crush him with all his strength. After that, he wanted Inoa to hand over the slave. He licked his teeth like a predator, tauntingly sharing that he felt like playing with her again. Seeing the horrified look on Romaria's face, Inoa couldn't help but feel an intense flow of fury. He retorted, asking what would happen if he were the one to win. Dominic only scoffed and erupted into loud laughter. Wanting to settle things, he recollected himself, and promised to obey anything Inoa asked if the boy succeeded. Suddenly, Dominic planted his foot firmly on the ground, preparing his stance. A flurry of energy erupted from his body, shooting toward the sky like a tornado. Aching to avenge himself, he screamed that there was no way he would let Inoa win. Seeing the sheer power radiating from his opponent, Inoa wondered if he was seeing magic. A dark, pulsing energy began to coil around Dominic's limbs like a living shadow. His muscles surged and swelled beneath his armor, shocking the crowd. One spectator suspected he was using body enhancement magic, which seemingly confirmed that Inoa was as good as dead. Body enhancement magic is just fantasy steroids. Change my mind. Meanwhile, Rod carefully observed the fight. He knew Dominic was a cunning man who finished off his targets carefully, which was why he had been nicknamed Dominic the Golden Crow. The sheer pressure of Dominic's mana began to overpower the arena, a silent testament to the danger he posed. He prepared to swing his sword, screaming that Inoa would regret picking a fight with him. With a speed that defied the weight of his plate armor, Dominic moved like a predatory bird. He swung his sword with a force meant to end the encounter in a single stroke. It was so fast it appeared as a mere slash. Inoa froze as he witnessed the attack slide past him. It was so powerful that it reduced the wall behind him to rubble. Dominic laughed, boasting that he would first block all possible escape routes. Meanwhile, Inoa kept quiet, trying to brainstorm a plan to defeat his opponent. If Dominic used body enhancement, then he should too, but he planned to use something much more powerful. A strange, pulsating object appeared in his palm, a fleshy, veined mass set to defeat Dominic. Fury wondered what it was, while Romaria had no idea. Tia remarked that it looked like a heart, her eyes twinkling as she thought it looked delicious. Just then, Inoa summoned the true-cut knife, but he didn't use it to strike Dominic. Instead, he made a single clean cut through the heart-like object. The flesh parted effortlessly, revealing a glowing core nestled within the muscle. Without a moment of hesitation, he plucked the core and swallowed it. Imagine being a villain and your opponent stops to eat a beating heart mid-fight. Inoa held his chest tightly, screaming that something was burning within him. Romaria started to worry, seeing that there was something wrong with him. Fairy also noticed that he looked like he was in pain. Tia thought there was no way it was a serious injury and suspected instead that he had food poisoning. She figured it was a bad idea for a human to eat raw entrails. Meanwhile, Dominic noticed that Inoa had started acting strange and wondered what was wrong. The core of the evil dragon, now with 100% of your daily recommended dose of trauma. The boy was full of openings, and Dominic guessed that he had lost the will to fight after realizing he had no chance of winning. Dominic shrugged, saying whatever to himself. In the end, someone who was about to die didn't matter to him. He suddenly swung his sword and in a split second sprinted towards Inoa. He announced his arrival and simultaneously unleashed the destructive slash attack. The strike was a vertical blur of light and steel that shattered the air. A massive shockwave ripped through the hall, enveloping the arena in dust and jagged splinters. Romaria worriedly screamed Inoa's name, her face frozen in pure horror as he vanished within the wreckage. Dominic stood over the smoking crater, looking down at the devastation with disappointment. Then the dust shifted. Dominic's smirk died instantly. Inoa was still there, standing at the center of the crater, holding the massive blade back with a single bare hand. He hadn't just survived the strike, he had caught it. Catching a magical sword with a bare hand is the ultimate ratio move. His appearance had fundamentally transformed. A jagged crimson horn sprouted from his brow and his eyes had shifted into reptilian slits that glowed with a predatory gold. Scales crept up his skin like living armor and a thick, powerful tail lashed behind him. He looked less like a boy and more like a dragon hybrid. He went from Gap Kids to Monster Hunter World in 3 seconds. The onlookers watched in stunned silence, seeing that the kid was still alive. They were in shock, refusing to believe that he had blocked such a powerful attack. They also noticed the terrifying change in his appearance. Dominic couldn't believe that this little boy had blocked his destructive slash, and he had no idea how it was possible. Suddenly he noticed the piercing gaze from Inoa's reptilian eyes, which made him back away in fear. He wondered what this boy had become, unable to shake the feeling that something was very different. Panic set in, and he scrambled backward to put distance between them. Nothing says I messed up like your opponent's pupils turning vertical. Romaria wondered if it was still Inoa, and Fairy thought it was possible. However, Tia pointed out that there was something strange about him. Meanwhile, Inoa analyzed the upgrades he had equipped. Upon seeing the information on his screen, he noticed that Analyze Level 2 showed more details. At the center of the heart found while dismantling Erasmus, there was a part called the Core of the Evil Dragon. Originally, he had planned to use it during the battle with Alan, but he was too curious to see what kind of effect it would have. He just couldn't resist. He clenched his hand tightly out of pure excitement, thinking about how he had gained the power of an evil dragon. Even though he had neutralized the poison with True Cut, it seemed that the side effects after the power ended would be unavoidable, so he knew he had better finish the fight quickly. He's literally the only person who can sushi grade his way into a power-up. Suddenly, Dominic sprung back into action. He gripped his sword with both hands, claiming that with his ultimate technique he would finish the duel with a single blow. He channeled his remaining strength into a deafening scream, wanting to end Inoa once and for all. The intense force coming from his attack shook the entire arena, making the spectators cling to their seats. One of the spectators couldn't believe that he was actually going to use this technique, as it would surely collapse the entire arena. The ground beneath them cracked open due to the sheer force of Dominic's power, but he didn't dare stop. He performed the Grand Destructive Slash attack, which he was certain would finally kill Inoa. The ground cracked open. Great, now Inoa doesn't even have to dig a hole to bury him. Yet Inoa didn't take a single step from where he was standing. As the sword neared his face, he simply raised his fist to receive the attack. Then, in a moment that seemed to defy all logic, the blade shattered the moment it touched his fist. The sword broke, and so did Dominic's will to live. The entire arena fell silent. Dominic was stunned, seeing Inoa still standing before him, unscathed. Before he could begin processing what had occurred, Inoa suddenly charged forward with immense speed. With his arm covered in dragon scales, he hurled his fist upward, striking Dominic with a decisive blow that sent him flying into the sky. The assault was so destructive that it seemed like a nuclear explosion from outside the building. The spectators stared at the hole in the roof where Dominic had shot out, unable to believe what they were seeing. The others couldn't even speak, they just stared at the new opening in the ceiling. Dominic isn't flying, he's being forcefully rehomed to the stratosphere. Just then another person announced that Dominic and the kid were gone. All that was left was the massive crater from the battle. The moment Dominic was flung into the heavens, Tia hummed in pure delight, happy that Inoa had performed a job well done. Elsewhere, Dominic continued hurling upward, powerless against his current dilemma. His thoughts traced back to his armor, which was tough enough to endure strikes from high-level monsters. However, it had been shattered in just 2 blows. He was pissed thinking about that kid, wondering who the hell he was. However, there was nothing he could do about it. He vowed that the next time they met he would make sure it was the boy's end. As Dominic continued to ascend, he prepared to reinforce his body for the landing. Then, to his horror, Inoa shot himself up to meet him in the sky. Dominic anxiously asked who the hell he was, then admitted that he had lost the duel. He desperately apologized and asked not to be punished further. However, Inoa cut him off, saying that he wasn't the one Dominic should be apologizing to. Dominic seemed confused, so Inoa screamed in his face that he should be apologizing to Romaria. Suddenly, his fist glowed red like embers, and he hurled it toward Dominic. He warned him to clench his teeth despite Dominic's distressed pleas. Using the evil flame fist, Inoa struck his arrogant opponent, making the sky burn bright red from the flames. He punched the arrogance right out of him and replaced it with 3 RD-degree burns. The spectators below were stunned by the sudden explosion and wondered what had happened. Suddenly, the entire arena was covered with a mixture of smoke and dust. Lying amid the crater was Dominic in a battered state, seemingly inches away from death. Inoa stood over him, still fuming with anger. After the fight with Dominic, Inoa's body returned to its normal state. The spectators pointed out that Dominic had passed out with his eyes open, and they couldn't believe that the little brat had defeated him. Just then the girls entered the arena, wanting to congratulate Inoa on his victory. Inoa smiled brightly upon seeing them and told them that he had done it. When Tia finally came close, she excitedly slammed Inoa into her breasts, hugging and suffocating him at the same time. Tia's hugs are basically a secondary boss fight. Fairy, who had already expected Inoa to win, told him he was amazing. Romaria quietly muttered his name, then told him how happy she was that he had gotten so angry for her sake. Inoa replied that it was only natural if someone said something like that to an important companion of his, he couldn't just stay quiet. Romaria blushed when she heard him use the word important and was unable to say anything else. Meanwhile, Rod, who had witnessed the entire fight, carried the unconscious Dominic over his shoulder. He planned to bring him to another room and told Inoa to come along. He recalled that before the duel, Inoa had made a promise with Dominic, which Inoa confirmed was true. They were going to get the location of the slaves out of him. Rod took Inoa and the group to a room with a bed where he laid Dominic down. There he told Inoa that he hadn't done badly in the duel. After all, not just anyone could defeat Dominic. Rod then introduced himself to Inoa and said it was nice to meet him. He mentioned that Dominic had agreed to do anything the group asked. With that, he asked Inoa and the girls what they wanted to know. Inoa replied that there was only one thing he wanted Dominic to tell him. Then out of nowhere, Rod pointed out how ambitious Inoa was, though he reiterated Dominic would do anything. His gaze was serious, which piqued Inoa's curiosity. Rod explained that the guild had extraterritoriality and operated under its own rules. Seeing that Inoa wasn't familiar with the term, Rod explained that their only rules concerned slave ownership. Dominic had known how to take advantage of that legal loophole to commit his misdeeds. Rod is basically the fantasy version of an IRS agent who specializes in violence. Moments later, Dominic had fully regained consciousness. He found himself tied up inside an empty room, but he had no recollection of how he had gotten there. That's what happens when a dragon boy uses your face as a launch pad. Rod entered, noting that he was finally awake. He then told Dominic that he had to fulfill the promise he made. Dominic gritted his teeth, cursing as he accepted his fate. Inoa asked Dominic about the place where Alan kept the slaves imprisoned. Dominic was surprised, realizing that was all Inoa wanted to know. He smiled and revealed that it was 9 kilometers away at the eastern fort. Rod knew the location and confirmed it was at the border checkpoint. Though he noted that civilians shouldn't be able to enter, Dominic revealed that Alan was paying off the sentries. Since the king would never go to a place like that, they wouldn't be found out. Hearing that, Inoa realized that Romaria had been taken to the border, which confirmed he had made the right decision. Dominic then demanded to be let go, claiming he had kept his promise. However, Rod was displeased with everything Dominic had done. He asked if Dominic had kidnapped children and sold them as slaves to the Wishtal family. Dominic didn't see the big deal, claiming he simply sold them, which didn't violate guild rules. Rod admitted he was right, but pointed out that Dominic shouldn't have investigated whose children they were. Dominic had run off without paying back borrowed money and had taken the daughter of the man he owed. The creditors were furious. Rod was sure they would make him suffer more than any slave. Dominic hung his head, desperately calling out to Inoa for help, fearing he would be killed. They can excuse slavery, but they draw the line at bad credit scores. Tia intervened, asking who he was to ask Inoa for help. Inoa told Dominic to apologize sincerely to Romaria. Dominic agreed, pleading that he only did everything on Alan's orders. With absolute despair on his face, he begged Romaria to forgive him. Everyone looked at her in shock, but her voice echoed. She said no. He had tried to hurt Inoa and she would never forgive him for that. She didn't say no because he kidnapped her, she said no because he touched her chef. Priorities. Hearing the verdict, Rod stepped forward, telling Dominic to resign himself to his fate. Dominic cursed, calling them all bastards. Then he let out a devilish laugh, calling them idiots for letting their guard down. He suddenly broke free from the ropes using the unbinding of restraint skill. Fairy was dumbfounded. Dominic lunged into the air, laughing as he asked if Inoa really thought he'd shown all his tricks during the duel. His true skill was Great Thief, and both Super Smell and Unbinding of Restraints were merely sub-abilities. He headed for the window, but then he suddenly fell, unable to move. Rod smirked, seeing that the plan was working. It turned out that Inoa had made him eat a paralysis mushroom while he was unconscious. The toxin stiffened the muscles, preventing him from moving for a while. As he lay stiff on the floor, he cursed them for poisoning him. Inoa is the only protagonist who uses a cooking ingredient to disable a Great Thief. Having no choice, he conceded and promised to return the girl. However, Rod replied that it no longer depended on him. A group of furious men entered the room. Without mercy, Rod told Dominic to speak with them instead. Dominic shrieked in fear as one of the men silenced him. The scene shifted with a jarring, brutal finality. Dominic was stripped of his clothes, and a massive rectangular block of solid iron was heated until it glowed like fire. Dominic really thought the Dragon Kid was the scary part. He forgot about late fees. Inoa quickly shielded Romaria's eyes, advising her not to look. Everyone kept silent as Dominic met his doom, knowing his karma was well-deserved. Suddenly, a woman dressed in an expensive kimono and adorned with tattoos and guns entered the room. She muttered that it was a pity she had missed the show, as she had been thinking of taking care of Dominic's punishment personally. Inoa wondered who the lady was, but he quickly looked away. He couldn't help but wonder why another girl had shown up dressed so indecently. Tia also noticed the woman's massive breasts and worriedly wondered if they were bigger than hers. Furious at the threat before her, Tia growled at the mysterious woman. "I sense a disturbance in the force, and it's approximately a double D." Suddenly, the woman remarked that it was hard to believe. She kneeled to meet Inoa's gaze, asking how a small child like him had managed to defeat Dominic. Inoa struggled to answer, but before he could mutter anything else, the woman thanked him. She introduced herself as Reina Ruiz, the boss of the Ruiz group. One of the children Dominic had kidnapped was her daughter. They had been after him, but he had run away too fast. Reina Ruiz? More like Reina ruin your life if you touch my kid. Inoa was surprised, but the events finally made sense to him. Reina explained that her daughter was not like her. She had a strong sense of justice and had seemingly confronted Dominic when she saw him doing something bad. Reina could only hope her daughter was safe. Just then Inoa asked what she planned to do. He wondered if she would send Dominic to retrieve her daughter, but Reina said no, knowing she couldn't trust him. Going to the Eastern Fortress meant going against the kingdom, yet she intended to launch an all-out attack with her group. Concerned, Inoa warned that if she did that, she would become a criminal. Even if she reunited with her daughter, they would likely be separated again. Reina was well aware of that, but as long as she could save her child, she didn't care about anything else. Inoa fell quiet, then he called out Reina's name. With a hand to his chest, he told her to leave the rescue of her daughter to him. Reina was stunned and argued that she couldn't ask so much of the person who had already helped her. Still, Inoa told her not to worry because he had his own reasons to go to that fortress anyway. Suddenly, his gaze softened, and he advised Reina that if she truly wanted what was best for her daughter, she should wait calmly for her return. He told a mob boss to wait calmly. The audacity of this child is truly S-rank. Reina fell silent and let Inoa continue. Inoa explained that this was a matter involving the Wishtal family and that he must settle it with his own hands. Reina stepped forward, admitting how much it pained her to ask, but she requested the favor of him. When Inoa confirmed he could do it, Reina thanked him and hugged him, ignoring the fact that she was suffocating him between her massive breasts. Anxious, Inoa quickly pushed her back and pleaded for her to step away. Inoa, dry, can take on a fortress. Reina, can you take on these measurements? Reina chuckled at his reaction and praised him for being so adorable. Suddenly, Tia cut into the conversation, tauntingly asking if they were done talking. She insisted that Inoa was very tired and advised Reina to take the useless Dominic and leave quickly. Tia noticed Reina was staring at her and asked what the matter was. Reina only smiled, saying it was nothing. With that, Reina stood up and said it was time for her to leave. She turned to her men, telling them to fall back as well. Rod threw Dominic over his shoulder, volunteering to escort them to the exit. When Reina finally reached the door, she turned back toward Inoa, blowing him a kiss and saying she hoped to see him later. When the door shut, Tia stared at Inoa with the eyes of a predator. Inoa quickly looked away, wondering what that was all about. Inoa quickly looked away because his survival instincts finally kicked in. Romaria mentioned that Reina was very charming, while Fairy remained quiet. Tia told the others that Reina didn't seem like a bad person but believed she could be more considerate. Since Inoa was a young boy, Tia felt things like that were poison to his eyes. However, Fairy and Romaria pointed out to Tia that she wasn't exactly in a position to say that. Inoa, on the other hand, silently scoffed at the thought that they viewed him as a young boy. After all, he was actually 30 years old. Then, out of nowhere, Inoa felt something sharp pierce his chest. Before he could make sense of things, he fell face first to the floor. The dragon power is cool until you realize the cooldown period involves a literal coma. The girls around him froze in shock, horror flashing on their faces. They immediately ran toward him, begging him to snap out of it. As they desperately called for help, Inoa drifted in and out of consciousness. He knew this was the side effect of the evil dragon core. And it was bad. He was losing consciousness by the second, and soon everything faded to black. Later, Inoa finally woke up to see Romaria's face staring at him. Seeing that he was awake, she hugged him tightly and started crying, saying how glad she was. She was relieved but also felt guilty for being the cause of his exhaustion. Inoa argued that he should be the one asking for forgiveness for making them worry so much. Just then he noticed a rumbling sound, making him wonder if it was an earthquake. To his shock, Tia, in her tiger form, busted through the walls while screaming his name. Kool-Aid Man. But with more fur and much louder screaming. She couldn't believe he was alive, though Inoa explained that she had almost given him a heart attack. Fairy thought it was good they had taken the shortest route, but Inoa told her they could have at least used the door. Fairy asked how he was feeling, and Inoa replied that he felt completely fine. Romaria expressed her relief. Then Tia remembered she had brought him a souvenir. As she slowly opened the bags, Inoa wondered what was inside. To his surprise, Tia presented a variety of fish, herbs, and mushrooms. They went through so much trouble to collect a salad that could kill a god. Inoa had a sudden sense of déjà vu. Tia proudly shared that she and Fairy had gathered the ingredients so Inoa could try them. Having his suspicions, Inoa quickly used his analyze skill. Almost all the wild plants were poisonous, even though they looked delicious. To his relief, the fish were fine. Tia was disappointed as they had gone through so much trouble to collect them, but Inoa told them not to worry. If he cooked them with True Cut, he could detoxify them. Tia cheerfully cheered that it was amazing, though she had expected nothing less. Inoa offered to make something right away, but Tia stopped him, pointing out that he had just recovered and should stay calm. She took the True Cut from him, insisting that she was borrowing it. They took the True Cut. That's like giving a toddler a lightsaber to make a sandwich. Inoue was visibly baffled, and even more so when Fairy and Romaria said they were also borrowing the kitchen. He realized what was about to happen. The girls were going to cook for him. Inoue's mouth hung wide open, unable to believe what he was witnessing. Inoue guessed that Romaria could probably cook something normal. He thought the same about Fairy, believing she could manage. However, the problem was Tia. He was certain she was going to make a disastrous meal. Just imagining it scared him. Imagining Tia's meal is basically the isekai version of a psychological horror movie. Suddenly Inoue's thoughts were interrupted when the girls approached, apologizing for the delay. They brought a trolley with 3 layers, and on each one was a mystery dish. Upon seeing a ridiculously huge platter, Inoue immediately concluded it was Tia's. Tia volunteered to go first, proving his guess right. Without wasting a second, she uncovered the dish, revealing it to be a special stew. Various fish stuck out of the bowl, mixed together with suspicious-looking mushrooms and herbs. Inoue anxiously asked what it was, wondering if she had just thrown all the ingredients into the pot whole. Tia shamelessly confirmed he was correct, but Inoue advised her that it was not something she should say so proudly. He told her the wild herbs were fine, but she shouldn't have put the whole fish in there. Tia didn't find anything wrong with it because she usually ate them whole, leading Inoue to remind her that he wasn't a tiger. Still, Tia insisted he try her cooking. She took a spoonful of the dubious-looking stew, urging him to taste it. Inoue shivered in fear, but since Tia had gone through the trouble of cooking it, he knew he had no choice. He closed his eyes and took a leap of faith. Usually that involves a parachute, not a spoonful of mystery pond. Then his expression lightened. The flavor intrigued him, which seemed to put pressure on Tia. Suddenly he asked if she had seasoned the stew at all, which shocked her. She had forgotten, as she didn't usually add seasoning. When you forget that humans don't just enjoy the raw metallic taste of iron in their blood, truly, being a tiger worked against her in every way. Putting that aside, Inoue confessed that the mountain vegetables and fish tasted good and lacked any fishy smell, making it better than he had expected. As he continued to eat, he guessed it was all thanks to the precise edge of True Cut. Tia's eyes glimmered with pure joy, seeing that Inoue approved of her dish. Next, Fairy volunteered to present her dish. As expected of a princess, Fairy had prepared a fancy laucaraca fillet with wild herb sauce from another world. Inoue was amazed. The dish looked delicious. He immediately praised Fairy for being such a good cook. Fairy shared that her servant had taught her long ago that a princess should at least know how to cook, which explained her skill. Inoue was impressed, as he had already expected high standards from a princess. Despite her jealousy, Tia tried to play it cool. She suggested that looks weren't everything and believed the taste mattered more. Inoue was unimpressed by the side comment, as she was acting as if her own dish had been perfect. As Inoue cut a tiny portion to taste, Fairy explained that she had added plenty of sauce. She smiled patiently, waiting for his comment. Just then Inoue screamed in pain, acting as if he were spewing fire from his mouth. The girls called out to him in concern, and he immediately told them it was way too spicy. He asked Fairy what she had put in the sauce, and she revealed it was a wild herb called Irakato Hanushi, which grew in the elven forests. She added plenty of sauce. That's like saying a volcano has plenty of heat. She erupted in laughter, as it seemed she had added too much of it. Seeing the menacing look on her face, Inoue asked if she had done it on purpose. She seemed to be enjoying his reaction far too much. Finally, Romaria presented her dish, sailfish fry. The dish was simple and neat, which was exactly what Inoue had expected from her. Fairy pointed out that it smelled wonderful, while Tia fought the urge to eat it herself. Romaria offered to feed Inoue a bite, and upon tasting it, he immediately fell in love with the flavors. It was crispy on the outside and tender and juicy on the inside. The more he chewed, the more the flavor of the fish came out. After squeezing some lemon on it, it became even more delicious. Seeing Inoue's reaction, Romaria couldn't help but be glad. Romaria is the only one who actually read the Cooking for Humans manual. After tasting everyone's dishes, Inoue lay on his bed complaining that his stomach hurt from eating too much. The girls pointed out that he didn't have to force himself to finish everything, but Inoue thought otherwise. He couldn't leave any leftovers, not when they had made the meal with so much care. Suddenly Fairy asked the million-dollar question, whose dish was the best? They all stared at Inoue with determined looks, each believing her name would be mentioned. However, Inoue said he couldn't rank them. They were all delicious, and they had made him really happy. He thanked everyone for their efforts, which brought smiles to their faces. Tia said he was welcome, while Fairy faintly chuckled. Romaria, on the other hand, complimented Inoue's charming kindness. Inoue's stomach hurts, but his brain is working at 200% to avoid a domestic war. Suddenly, someone walked through the corridor and knocked on Inoue's door. He wondered who it was, only to see Reina. Tia furiously asked what she was doing there, and Reina briefly explained that she had come to talk to the boy. The boy is currently recovering from elven salsa. Inoue was curious, wondering what Reina wanted to discuss. Inoue and the girls decided to visit the private property of the Ruiz group, and there Tia was having a full-on tantrum. She reminded everyone that they were supposed to bathe together, and yet they were still wearing clothes. Inoue explained to her that they were wearing sauna wear, which was clothing that they could keep on while bathing. So with that said, they would enjoy the sauna together. Suddenly, Romaria pointed out that it sounded like being tortured by fire and water, but Inoa called her out, telling her to stop saying it like that. She was just calling it as I saw it. They were going into a box to sweat and suffer. He reassured the girls that if they entered the sauna, their abilities would increase significantly for a while. Furry guessed that this was a preparation for their upcoming battle, and Inoa confirmed that she was right. This disappointed Tia, as she thought he simply had a pure desire to bathe, but it turned out he had ulterior motives. However, Romaria pointed out that she was the one who had ulterior motives, which made Inoa laugh. After that, Inoa explained the process of the whole sauna experience. It was called the Artifact Level Sauna, the Trial of the 12. For every complete harmonization cycle, all stats temporarily increase by plus 300. To properly go through the harmonization flow, one was to enter the sauna at 176 Fahrenheit for at least 8 minutes. They would then enter the cold bath at 60-75 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 30 seconds. They were then to take an outdoor air bath for at least 5 minutes, which then completes one full cycle. Before proceeding to the actual harmonization cycle, Inoa suggested that they hydrate properly. After that, they went right into the sauna. Once inside, Inoa reminded the girls not to overdo it. If it got too hot, they could come out. The girls confirmed that they got it, and they did their best to relax. With that, they finally began. 1 minute later, Tia struggled amid the intense heat. She pointed out that it had been 5 minutes, but Inoa corrected her and said that it had only been 1. He guessed that she wasn't good with heat, and she didn't even deny it. Tia treats a 1-minute sweat session like a trip to the center of the sun. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed and she boasted that this was nothing. However, she soon erupted in pure agony, complaining that it was hot and that she couldn't take it anymore. She burst out of the sauna, leaving the others stunned. Romaria realized that Tia had a weakness after all, while Fairy expressed her utter surprise. Now that they mentioned it, Inoa recalled that tigers were weak to heat. 5 minutes later, Inoa noticed that it was starting to get tough even for him. He asked the girls if they were still okay, and they reassured him that they were fine despite the intense heat. Inoa started sweating bullets, but he commended them for being amazing. Not long after, they finally exited the sauna. Inoa tried to catch his breath, confessing that he barely made it through. Fairy pointed out that it was still hot even outside the sauna. Romaria, on the other hand, said that it went by faster than she expected. After that, they took a dip in cold water where their bodies finally relaxed from the intense sauna experience. Inoa let out a relaxed sigh while Fairy pointed out that she was getting used to the cold water. Romaria also shared the same thoughts, mentioning that it felt so good. Inoa wished Tia could experience how good it felt too, but she was not interested at all. In the end, she still preferred the traditional bath. She didn't know how the three of them could endure that much heat. Fairy admitted that it was pretty tough for her too, which surprised Inoa. He asked if she was okay, but Fairy reassured him that she was, even though it was hard. When she saw Inoa's face looking like he was suffering too, it gave her the strength to keep going. She saw his face looking like he was dying and she thought, yeah, I can do 1 more minute of that. Romaria asked if they should repeat the process several times and Inoa confirmed it, adding that next time it would be at 230 Fahrenheit. He asked if she could handle it, and Romaria proudly said that she would be fine. This surprised Inoa as it showed that Romaria was truly heat resistant. Just then Tia disrupted the group's peace, appearing right in front of them butt naked. With her body bare before them, she asked if it was now time for the outdoor air bath. Inoa quickly covered his eyes, asking Tia why she wasn't wearing any clothes. She innocently replied that it was so hot, so she took them off. Inoa relentlessly screamed no, and he insisted that she had to wear clothes for the air bath. Wanting to assure him, Tia said that she would put them on once she was outside. Inoa slowly opened his eyes, thinking that Tia was done with all her teasing. However, she still had no clothes on, making it seem like it was acceptable because it was just too hot in the sauna. Tia was sporting a weird pose when she said that, making Inoa wonder what it was about, because if you're going to give your boss a heart attack, you might as well do it with style. He was now stunned by the thought that the sacred beast was trying to tempt him. Horrified by the thought, he called Tia a lewd beast. He vowed that he wouldn't let her seduce him, so he told her to do as she pleased. He stood from the tub, saying that he would just have to head outside with his eyes closed. Tia was annoyed for a moment, but then her eyes widened in surprise. She warned Inoa that he was going the wrong way, but it was too late. He slipped after stepping on Tia's dress, and now he was about to fall. The girls screamed, seeing that they might be too late to save him. Meanwhile, Inoa realized that he had stepped on Tia's dress, and now he was about to hit his head. He waited to crash on the cold floor, but it surprisingly felt soft. To his surprise, Romaria had caught him from behind, and now she was asking him if he was okay. His head ended up landing on her breasts, which mortified him. Feeling apologetic for his actions, Inoa slammed his forehead on the ground. Romaria was puzzled, asking why he was apologizing. Inoa felt hesitant to say it out loud, but he eventually explained to Romaria that he was touching her breasts. Romaria fell silent for a moment, but then the truth sank in, and she freaked out. She slammed her head on the floor in apology, and it was so intense that some of the tiles cracked apart. You know, an apology is sincere when it requires a construction crew to fix the tiles afterward. She argued that she should be the one apologizing for making him uncomfortable. Inoue said that he was not uncomfortable at all, and he didn't mean that in a weird way. In fact, he was actually grateful, but not in a weird way either. As the two tried to comfort each other, Tia couldn't help but laugh out loud. They then started to blame Tia, so she apologized to make them feel better. Not long after, it was finally nighttime, and everyone relaxed on their own folding beds at the house's front porch. Fairy mentioned that her body felt warm and relaxed, but Tia, on the other hand, felt nothing at all. Inoue chuckled, then he pointed out that she left after just a minute. Just then he mentioned that he was worried that Romaria might not like the sauna either, but it looked like that was a false alarm. Romaria asked why he thought that, so Inoue explained to her that she had once mentioned that the sauna was like self-inflicted torture. Suddenly, Romaria smiled, touched by his kindness. She reassured him that she was truly fine, so they shouldn't worry about her. In fact, she thought she was glad that she became a slave because it let her meet all of them. Sis was happy for the promotion. They got angry for her and even fought for her, and that alone made her more than happy. Because of that, she didn't want them to risk themselves for her anymore. Inoue muttered her name in concern, trying to counter her thoughts while trying to explain how she was wrong. However, Tia suddenly cut him off, saying that when it was for their companions, getting angry, fighting, or taking risks was only natural. Romaria wanted to argue, but Inoue agreed with Tia. If something was hard for her, she shouldn't hesitate to ask for their help. No matter what happens, they would make it right. Romaria looked at her friends, then she looked up at the sky as she thanked them. At that moment, she was just so happy to be alive. Suddenly, she urged Inoue to proceed with round 2, surprising him with her enthusiasm. "Put me in, coach. I was born for the broiler." The next morning, Inoue informed the girls that Reina would be coming soon, so they should hurry and get changed. To his shock, he realized he had just walked into an awkward scene. Tia was all tangled up with Fairy on the couch, and they were playing with each other's ears. Stunned, Inoue asked what they were doing. Tia, who had no ounce of shame, simply replied that they were touching each other. That is the least helpful explanation in the history of language. Fairy added that Tia's ears and tail were soft and fluffy, and Tia also complimented Fairy's cute ears, which were long and pointy. Fairy blushed, telling Tia that she didn't need to praise her like that. They suggested that Inoue join too, but he quickly said that he was okay. Tia smirked, thinking that even if he said that, he was still the one staring at her tail. Inoue grunted in shame, knowing that he was a confirmed cat lover. Suddenly, Tia perked up her butt, showing off her tail to Inoue. She teased him, saying that there was no need to hold back. Left with no response, Inoue said that it wasn't like he was holding back. Just then he spotted Romaria staring at him, seemingly wanting something she couldn't say. He suddenly got an idea. Romaria could touch Tia instead. Romaria's eyes sparked with excitement, asking if she could really do that. Tia had no issues with it, so she told her to go ahead and touch her. Romaria wasted no time, and as she expected, Tia's fur was incredibly fluffy. Inoue could only stare in disbelief as Tia suggested that Romaria rub her face in it if she wanted. He was starting to get more and more embarrassed by the minute, seeing that the girls were way too comfortable. Tia suggesting Romaria rub her face in it is the ultimate test of Inoue's ability to pretend he's still in an action-adventure story. Just then, Tia turned to Inoue, asking him to come over too. She hugged Romaria with a knowing look, then she told him that holding it in was bad for his body. Inoue cursed in his head, struggling to deny that he was jealous. Still, he reminded himself that he must resist. Suddenly, Reina stepped into the room, saving Inoue from his current dilemma. She asked if they were all awake, and Inoue quickly confirmed it, adding that they were opening up the place. Tia, on the other hand, was pissed to see Reina again. Just then, Reina informed everyone that she had secured a carriage at the East Gate, and Inoue thanked her for it. Reina then pointed out that even with his unbelievable abilities, she never expected Inoue to build a house. Inoue thought it was not that big of a deal, especially since she helped them a lot by letting them use the land. After that, he told Reina that once the girls got into their disguises, they would all head to the East Gate. With that, he told the girls to get changed. Reina nodded when she heard this, but in her head she couldn't help but commend him for having a good group. Not long after, they headed right into the Eastern Stronghold. Upon arriving, Inoue immediately felt a bad feeling about what they were about to do. Everyone prepared themselves, as they didn't know what awaited them at the East Gate of Valis Kingdom. Before starting their mission, Tia told Romaria that she hadn't changed that much in her disguise. Romaria asked if that was really true, then she confessed that she was nervous because she still was not used to it. Reina then mentioned that she only changed Romaria's hair color and hairstyle, so her discomfort must be because of the glasses Inoue gave her. Inoue chuckled, saying that it was better to be safe than sorry. Wanting to reassure her, Fairy told Romaria that the glasses suited her, the Clark Kent of the fantasy world. Change the hair, add frames, and suddenly she's a different person. Just then, Reina called out to Inoue, reminding them of their plan. As they had talked about, Romaria would be his servant, but she was still unaware of the other girls' roles. He revealed that they would be a gift, which confused Reina. Suddenly, he flashed a menacing smile, explaining that they would offer them as tribute to make sure they would accept him without suspicion. Inoue proceeded to explain the entire plan to Reina. First, he would pretend to be from a branch family of House Wishtal, then he would enter, claiming he captured the elven princess. Romaria would be his servant, and Tia would act as a beast they captured on the way to the Eastern Gate. Fairy and Tia would be his slaves, which would explain why their clothes were dirty. Despite their questionable roles, the girls reassured him that it was fine. Reina understood his plan, and now she had the whole gift idea he mentioned. With this, he should be able to infiltrate the place. Just then, Reina realized that Inoa had mentioned that Fairy was a princess, so she asked if it was true. Fairy confirmed it, but she mentioned that her homeland had been destroyed. Inoa explained that Fairy's people were imprisoned in the fortress, so they originally planned to rescue them. Reina now understood why Inoa wanted to help her. It was because her daughter was imprisoned along with the elven people. It's not just a rescue mission anymore, it's a full-scale prison break for an entire race and a very stubborn redhead. She smiled at the thought of it and she thanked him. Inoa told her not to worry, and he promised that they would save her little girl. Just then he asked for her daughter's name, and Reina answered that it was Ramilia. She added that she had red hair tied to one side, but there was something else that Inoa had to know. Ramilia had a stubborn and distrustful personality, and even if he rescued her, she might not believe him. This made Inoa ponder, and then he finally had a great idea to solve the problem. He summoned an item from his inventory, the camping item called a walkie-talkie. Since they would be separated, he told Reina to use it and hold it near her face. She followed Inoa's directions, and he confirmed that she was doing it right. Just then, Inoa distanced himself from her and he spoke to Reina through the walkie-talkie. He asked if she could hear him, but Reina was too stunned to hear his voice coming out of the device. Inoa thought it was perfect, as she was now able to explain the situation directly to her. Reina admitted that it felt like the work of a master craftsman, so she happily shared that she would use it well. Technically, it's the work of a factory in Shenzhen, but sure. After that, Inoa and the girls entered a carriage. Reina left her daughter's fate in the group's hands, so Inoa proudly vowed that she could count on him. He thought about the elves Ramilia and Trezia, and he promised to save them all. His palm curled into a fist, mentally telling Alan to wait for him. Meanwhile, in the Wistal residence, a massive crash could be heard from the training grounds. A man, thick-armed, with a solid and powerful build, was hurled right into the walls. He was weak and unable to get up, shocking the guards who witnessed his downfall. The captain was defeated in a single strike. They were still in shock, unable to believe that this was the true power of Lady Trezia. Meanwhile, Trezia worriedly looked at the captain, apologizing for being unable to control herself, even though she only used 20%. If 20% is accidental demolition, 100% is deleting the zip code. As Trezia looked at the aftermath of her attack, she knew that she couldn't pretend to be a hero without controlling her power. Just then someone commended her for her wonderful performance, and when she turned to see who it was, her eyes sparkled with joy. It was Alan, who was clapping his hands, proud of his daughter. Alan, wonderful performance. The captain in the wall, I am literally seeing the afterlife, sir. Trezia kneeled before him, saying that it was a great honor to receive his praise. Alan told her that he had high expectations for her, and she acknowledged it with grace. Trezia was also tasked to go to his room after she finished her training. Trezia bowed her head lower, saying that she understood. She smiled at the thought of Alan, vowing that she would never forget the favor he did for her that day. Trezia was the daughter of a branch family of the Wistal household, and among the branches, her family was especially low-ranked. Her parents desperately worked as adventurers to contribute because if they didn't, they would have been expelled from the Wistal family. And so they taught her swordsmanship relentlessly. However, her parents died when she was 8. Apparently, while returning from exploring a dungeon, they were suddenly attacked by a dragon. On that gloomy day, Trezia couldn't stop crying. Alan was the one who reached his hand out to her at that moment. He sheltered her from the rain, telling her that she might catch a cold if she stayed there. He smiled at her and said that she must be Trezia, then he went on to introduce himself as the head of the Wistal family. He was aware that her parents served the Wistal family until the very end, and they were truly admirable people. He couldn't have imagined they would encounter a cursed dragon. Suddenly, he embraced Trezia, drenching himself in the rain along with her. He believed that the fact that she survived was a blessing. He invited Trezia to live together with him, reassuring her that she could leave her future in his hands. The rain pouring inside Trezia's heart stopped. An ray of light pierced the darkness. Alan meant everything to her. Alan's head of the family starter pack, a drenching rainstorm, a dramatic hug, and a long-term plan to gaslight an orphan. After her training, she headed directly to Alan's office, just as he instructed. As she entered the room, Alan praised her for her admirable skills. Trezia then kneeled before him, thanking him for his kind comments. However, she insisted that something of that level was nothing extraordinary. She swore that she would continue training without rest, and when the Demon King resurrected, she would defeat him. Alan merely stared at her, seemingly reserving his true thoughts to himself. Just then he muttered her name, and he reminded her not to be in such a rush. Seeing that she was confused, Alan explained that the subjugation of the Demon King must happen when the people live in fear and cry out for a savior. To awaken those who had grown complacent in peace, certain sacrifices were necessary. Why stop a fire when you can wait until the whole city is screaming, then show up with a glass of water and be called a god? Trezia fell silent, then she hesitatingly pointed out that it would mean there would be victims. Still, Alan reassured her that there was no need to worry. She only needed to follow what he said. He told her to believe in him and follow. Tresia pledged her allegiance to him, but deep inside she had to reassure herself that it was Alan they were talking about. Surely there was a deeper plan behind it. All she must do was become Alan's sword and devote herself completely. That was enough. Just then Alan stood from his seat, suggesting that they talk about the reason he called her. A few days ago, a man named Dominic associated with the Eastern Fortress was attacked, and he vanished without a trace. There was a possibility that Dominic leaked confidential information about the fortress, so after their discussion, he might head there and prepare for a possible attack. And that was why he wanted Tresia to join the defense of the Eastern Fortress as well. Without hesitation, Tresia agreed to participate in Alan's plan. Just then, Alan turned hysterical, dramatically telling her to strike down the attackers with her sword of justice. This fired up Tresia's spirits, and she reassured him that he could leave it to her. They were to depart in 30 minutes, so Alan commanded her to prepare herself. After their brief meeting, Tresia found herself stuck in her thoughts while showering. She thought about Alan and how he was expecting so much from her. He recognized her worth. Suddenly a smile crept on her face, realizing that she was different from Inoa. That's the smile of someone who has successfully been gaslit into thinking collateral damage is a personality trait. Elsewhere, Inoa and the girls traveled to the Eastern Gate. While in the carriage, Tia enjoyed a quick snack as he learned about the girl Inoa wanted to save, Tresia. Just then she realized that the food she was eating was good, so she offered some to the others. Meanwhile, Inoa confirmed that he was truly set on rescuing Tresia. However, Romaria thought that she was unfairly holding a grudge against him. Fairy, on the other hand, couldn't help but sympathize with Inoa. Despite Tresia's treatment, Inoa insisted that he was the one at fault. Now he clearly understood Alan's crimes, but even long ago there were signs. If only he had properly protected Tresia, things wouldn't have ended like that. Tia muttered his name in concern, but Inoa kept on speaking. He believed that if this continued, Treya would end up involved in Alan's wrongdoing, so they must stop it at all costs. That was why he wanted to ask for everyone's help. Just then, Tia slapped him on the arm, playfully asking what he was saying. Caught off guard, Inoa let out a strong yelp. Suddenly, Tia smiled, telling him that the people he wanted to save were the same ones she wanted to save as well. Romaria agreed, and she claimed to do everything to be of help to him. Romaria is 100% ready to headbutt a fortress for this man. Fairy didn't say much, but she promised to do the same. Inoa was stunned, but then he smiled and thanked the girls. Just then, Inoa turned to the window and noticed a rainbow, so he told Tia and Romaria about it. Not wanting to miss it, Romaria quickly took a look. As expected, she was amazed by its beauty, and she was also amused by it because it seemed like the sky was cheering them on. Inoa asked the others if they could also see it from their window, but they couldn't see the rainbow they were talking about. All they could see was a giant eye staring at them from outside, which confused them. Inoa, on the other hand, froze as he stared at the eye. Romaria, the sky is cheering us on with a rainbow. The monster. Actually, that's just the sunlight reflecting off my giant terrifying eyeball. Then, out of nowhere, chaos ensued. The horses panicked, making the coachman lose control of the carriage. He screamed in horror as he stared at the abomination before him. It was a giant snake-like monster, seemingly eager to devour them. Romaria panicked as soon as she saw the monster. With fear in her voice, she said that she wasn't good with snakes. Meanwhile, Tia observed the monster, and she noticed that it didn't have eyes on its face but had them on its tail. As if she were amused, she said it was strange. Inoa thought it was the opposite. Maybe the part with eyes was the face. However, none of that mattered at that moment. Suddenly, the coachman pointed out that the monster had pure white scales and a face on the tail, which left him with no doubt about its nature. It was the Imperial Serpent Venena Popus, a Class C monster with an extermination quest. Just then, the Imperial Serpent hissed at them, its sound horrifying them upon hearing it. However, Fairy was unfazed, and she simply said that it was trying to intimidate them. Tia wasn't too bothered by it either, and she happily shared that snakes tasted delicious, just like birds and fish. She was checking the nutritional facts while the coachman was losing his shit. Suddenly, Inoa called out to the coachman, informing him that they would handle the monster and that he should evacuate the carriage. Confused, the coachman asked what he meant by handle it, as it seemed like Inoa wasn't listening. The monster was Class C, and one wouldn't come out unscathed. Still, Inoa insisted that it was fine. He advised the coachman to just run for it, and having no choice, the man complied. He got on the carriage, leading it away from the battlefield. He thanked the team as he left, but in his head he knew he wasn't paid enough for all that chaos. Back in the forest, Inoa and the girls prepared to take the Imperial Serpent down. As Tia stretched her muscles, Inoa asked how they should beat it. Before getting down to business, he used his Analyze skill to see how strong their opponent was. The monster was known as Venena Popus, an Imperial Serpent that lives in the Tsoaman Sea of Trees. Despite being a rank C monster, its weakness was in its head. It also had water as an effective attribute. The name and habitat matched what the coachman said, but Inoa decided to think about that later. Just then he told Tia that he would attack first, and she acknowledged his plan. Using his camp action, Inoa summoned a bucket of water from thin air, which confused the girls. Next, he summoned a portable shower and told Tia to hold him from behind. When you're an S-rank character, even home improvement items become weapons of mass destruction. Without wasting time, she appeared behind him, grabbing the chance to wrap him in her arms. She asked if she was doing it right, but Inoa corrected her. Annoyed, he told her to stance herself where she could brace more firmly. After that, he aimed the shower straight at the Imperial Snake's weak point using the effective attribute. With extreme water pressure and maximum output, Inoa released a hydro cannon so strong that the recoil shocked Tia. She had to hold herself down with all her lower body strength just so she wouldn't fly away from the sheer force. Meanwhile, Inoa stood strong, screaming for the Imperial Snake to take the attack. The hydro cannon struck the monster like a forceful wave, leaving it helpless against the onslaught. When the attack was finally over, the Imperial Snake's head was nowhere to be seen. It had been severed off by the hydro cannon. Tia announced that it was over, but she soon realized that they were far from achieving that. That confidence lasted 2 seconds. The Imperial Snake's body, still with a severed head, roared in fury. Romaria was confused, recalling that it had lost its head. They got scammed mid-fight. Tia asked why it was still alive, while Inoa expressed his disbelief. Now he was left wondering if he had actually attacked the monster's true head. Then, out of nowhere, the Imperial Snake just vanished into thin air. The group was stunned, unable to believe what the beast just did. Romaria pointed out that it disappeared, but Fairy thought otherwise. Romaria seemed puzzled by what she said, so Fairy revealed that the snake had turned itself invisible. Fairy seemed to be the only one who could see it, making her wonder if this was the effect of the sauna Inoa mentioned. In her current state, she knew she could defeat it. The rest are NPCs at this point. Suddenly, the Imperial Snake neared Inoa, attempting to strike while he was defenseless. However, before it could land a lethal blow, Fairy released her arrow and struck it. Inoa, who was clueless about the whole situation, was shocked to see the Imperial Snake's blood spurting everywhere. With a proud tone to her words, Fairy told Inoa that she didn't hate snakes, unlike Romaria. She wiped off the snake's blood from her face, vowing that she would take good care of Inoa. Long ago, as a young elf, Fairy had a relentless pursuit of strength. Her arrow failed to pierce through a giant rock, frustrating her in the process. She gasped for air, muttering that she needed more power. She's fighting geology and getting humbled. Beside her, her mentor gently reminded her that her magic power wouldn't increase all at once. It was already getting dark, so he advised her to stop for the day. Still, Fairy persisted, asking what he was saying. She was just getting started after all. However, her body instantly betrayed her the moment she said those words. Fairy slammed into the ground, collapsing from extreme exhaustion. Her mentor immediately ran toward her, wondering if she ran out of magic power. She hyped herself up and got folded immediately. For her age, just being able to channel magic at all was already an incredible talent. If she had stronger magic power, she would have become an extraordinary archer. In the present time, the invisible Imperial Snake revealed itself into the light, wailing from the pain Fairy's arrow had caused. Stunned, Inoa looked back, wondering if that arrow came from her. Tia thought the snake had disappeared, but now it suddenly showed up. Just then, Inoa called out to Fairy, asking how she was able to attack an invisible snake. Fairy explained that she made magic power flow into her eye, allowing her to detect the snake's magic power. The elven race excelled at controlling magic power. Upon hearing that, Inoa recalled that he had once read a book which said that magic power was the life energy possessed by living beings and the driving force behind magic. Suddenly, Fairy told Inoa that she had to take advantage of the moment when the snake hesitated. She then took out her bow and arrow, aiming it toward the snake. With a cold tone, she told everyone to leave it to her and to protect Romaria. Inoa and Tia were left speechless, while Romaria warned her that it was dangerous for her to fight alone. Inoa agreed, adding that they should fight together. However, Fairy only told them not to worry because she had already been awakened. Confused by what that meant, the rest of the group told her that she made no sense. Fairy continued speaking, saying that giving instructions about the position of an invisible snake while fighting was complicated. She bluntly told everyone that they were just in her way. That was disrespectful but kinda true. Inoa felt her harsh words pierce his chest and he could only grunt as if he were physically hurt. Tia called her out for being cruel, and she reminded her that she was a sacred beast. Knowing that Fairy was right, Inoa, Tia, and Romaria had no choice but to leave the battleground. Unbeknownst to them, Fairy had deeper intentions for keeping them away from the fight. Inoa and Tia were always the ones fighting, so once in a while she had to do her best for them too. Meanwhile, Tia smiled, leaving the rest to Fairy. She tried to hide her laugh as she thought of this, making Inoa ask what was wrong. In her head, she thought about how Fairy was so shy. In the battlefield, Fairy stood her ground against the Imperial Snake, tauntingly asking it if they should continue. Just then, the snake disappeared again, but this didn't faze Fairy. The monster's invisibility doesn't affect her. She loosed an arrow, a streak of white light that tore through the clearing. The serpent was fast, impossibly so, and it twisted its massive body, narrowly dodging the initial strike. For a heartbeat, it seemed the monster had escaped, but Fairy's expression remained cold and focused. If the monster could dodge her attacks, then she would have to force the arrow to hit. In a display of sheer elven mastery, she performed the magic-controlled tracking shot, compelling the arrow to hunt the monster down. Bro unlocked homing missiles. The tracking shot found its mark with a thunderous impact, but the victory Fairy expected did not come. The arrow buried itself into the serpent's scales, but it didn't pierce the beast, it melted. Fairy was stunned, realizing that the monster had incredible speed and a poisonous armor. The snake said, "Nice try." To defeat it, the only thing left for her to do was restrict its movements. Just then, her eyes landed on one of her arrows embedded in the ground. Her gaze narrowed, and she began to calculate a new path to victory. From the safety of a nearby tree, the group watched the desperate struggle through binoculars, their hearts heavy with uncertainty. Romaria asked if Fairy would be okay, while Inoa kept insisting that it was better to fight together. However, Tia told them that just being able to use magic without being a demon was already amazing, so they just had to trust Fairy. Back in the battleground, the air grew thick from the scent of smoke and dust. Fairy unleashed a relentless barrage of attacks, and she moved like a phantom through the trees. Arrow after arrow streaked through the sky, only to slam into the dirt or shatter against nearby rocks miles away from the serpent's writhing body. High above, her friends watched the chaotic spectacle through their binoculars, their confusion quite obvious. Romaria noticed that Fairy's attacks hadn't hit for a while now. However, Tia believed that it was more than just missing, as it looked like she was deliberately letting them miss. Inoa agreed, thinking that Fairy was planning something. Let her cook now. Meanwhile, Fairy kept firing shots, persistently telling herself to go on just a little more. With one final thunderous shot that struck the ground, her trap was sprung. The ground beneath the serpent groaned and gave way. Romaria saw the whole scene with her binoculars, and she immediately reported to everyone that the ground was cracking more and more. Inoa looked closely, seeing that all the arrows were going to the same spot. He saw it now. Fairy's target was the ground. The ground around the area was so fragile that just one arrow hitting it would cause cracks. Suddenly, Fairy descended from a massive tree branch, looking down at the writhing serpent. A smug, triumphant smile crossed her face, pointing out that arrows that didn't deal damage were used without directly aiming at the enemy. At that moment, the Imperial Snake was nothing but a fool. With one final decisive movement, Fairy leaped from her perch. In midair, she drew her bow back to its limit, and she loosed a shot infused with the totality of her magic power. The impact was cataclysmic. Tons of rock and earth collapsed into a massive crater, dragging the serpent down into the abyss. Fairy didn't just miss her shots, she gave the serpent a one-way ticket to the center of the earth. Seeing the unbelievable moment unfold before him, Inoa recalled how Fairy continuously attacked a single point, causing cracks in the ground. In the end, it delivered a powerful blow to open a huge hole all at once. With that, she trapped the snake. Inoa's "let her cook" went from a meme to a legitimate tectonic assessment. High above the crater's rim, Fairy playfully asked the snake if it could still escape. She sarcastically apologized, but she reminded the snake that it was also to blame for blocking their path. Now she would take care of giving it a proper taste. The serpent looked up, its singular, massive eye wide with what appeared to be fear. Suddenly, Fairy performed a technique that required imbuing an enormous amount of magic into both the bow and arrow. Since her magic was weak from birth, no matter how much she trained, she was never able to master it. But now she was more than capable of doing it. Just then, her body erupted in a blinding white aura. By concentrating her magic to its absolute limit into her bow and arrow, and with the image of fusing them into one, she fired the attack. Fairy's eyes locked onto the serpent, and she simultaneously released 3 attacks: the Kairos style, white piercing, and anti-demon archery technique. A blast of pure incandescent light erupted from the crater, vaporizing the shadows and tearing through the serpent. Seeing Fairy's success, the group said in unison that she did it. Meanwhile, Fairy thought about her mentor, Fred, mentally thanking him for training her. She couldn't have done it alone, but thanks to Inoa, she now could. She had become stronger than she was back then, so she vowed to save her elven people. She looked up at the sky with pure determination, hoping that they could wait for her. Inoa must have realized he didn't just hire an archer, he accidentally sponsored a nuclear-grade elven sniper. Fairy stared at the crater from above, relieved that the chaos was finally over. Suddenly a loud noise captured her attention, and when she looked back, she was greeted by the ever-lively Tia in her tiger form. Tia lunged toward her, screaming her name with joy. Having no care for how much she weighed, she slammed her body over Fairy, crushing her on the ground. Tia's love language is unintentional physical trauma. Inoa worriedly warned Tia that she shouldn't hug Fairy like that, especially since she weighed like 200 kilos. Romaria was just as alarmed, as she might end up crushing Fairy. Tia instantly realized what she had done, realizing that she had forgotten she was in her tiger form. However, Fairy only smiled, reassuring them that it was fine because Tia was very fluffy. Just then, Tia expressed her disbelief that Fairy was able to defeat a serpent all by herself. As she reverted to her human form, she told Fairy how amazing she was. Meanwhile, Inoa realized that the serpent was a Class C monster, making it the same level as Erasmus. Suddenly, Fairy discredited Tia's praise, insisting that it was Inoa's skill that allowed her to defeat the monster. Seeing the confusion on Inoa's face, Fairy explained that she was able to control magic, but her magical power itself was weak. However, thanks to his cooking and the sauna, her magic became stronger, and she was also able to use the archery technique she was taught. That was why, rather than saying she defeated it, it was Inoa who should be credited. However, before she could even finish her sentence, Inoa interjected, insisting that she was the one who defeated the monster. Fairy was stunned, but Inoa kept on. He agreed that it may be true that the increase in her magical power was thanks to his ability, but if she hadn't had that magic control she talked about or her archery technique, he was sure she wouldn't have been able to do it. Besides, even the fact that they met was because she didn't give up and kept chasing Erasmus. Fairy was speechless, and she was only able to mutter his name. Inoa continued, saying that everything was the result of what she achieved on her own. With that, he urged her to have more confidence in herself. Unable to contain her emotions any further, Fairy broke into tears, thanking Inoa with all her heart. Inoa smiled brightly, and so did Romaria and Tia. The only thing she couldn't dodge with her phantom movement was Inoa's relentless sincerity. Suddenly, the coachman appeared, worriedly asking if they were all okay. Just then, he caught sight of the Imperial Snake's lifeless body, and he could say nothing else but incredible. He never thought they would actually defeat it. Just then, Inoa told the others that it was time to butcher the beast, much to Tia's excitement. She just couldn't wait to eat it, which horrified the coachman. He asked if they would truly eat the monster, and Tia innocently confirmed it. Romaria was sure that it would be cooked deliciously, especially with Inoa's cooking. Fairy agreed, noting that there was nothing to worry about. Still, the coachman had his doubts. Meanwhile, Inoa stretched out his muscles, preparing himself for the arduous task of cooking the Imperial Snake. Before eating, they needed to evaluate all the parts and find the Imperial Serpent Core, which was the equivalent of an evil dragon core. Using his analysis skill, he immediately went straight to doing the task. However, as he scanned the carcass, he was shocked to see that it wasn't there. He wondered if Erasmus's core must have been a rare drop material, and he ended up using it on an idiot like Dominic. Having no choice, he ended up cooking the Imperial Snake instead. Using True Cut, he effortlessly sliced through the monster's meat, revealing its lean nature. Originally designed for epic battles, now used to make sure the burger patties are perfectly symmetrical. Rather than poultry or fish, it was closer to red beef. He thought about what to do with it, and after some thinking, he decided on a dish. First, he finely chopped the wild risabi plant, which was similar to an onion. He sautéed it until it turned caramel-colored. He then minced the meat of Venenopopus and Erasmus, then added the caramelized risabi, egg, breadcrumbs, and seasonings. He mixed them together until they became sticky. He then took a large portion big enough to overflow his palm and shaped it while removing the air. He made an indentation in the center and cooked it in a pan, steaming while searing both sides. Meanwhile, he sautéed sinewy meat and aromatic vegetables until browned. Then he added red wine, water, sauce, ketchup, and a bouquet garni. He then let it reduce, and after, he placed the cooked meat on a plate and poured the finished sauce over it. Not long after, the Dragon Serpent hamburger was finally ready. It increases vitality, attack, and defense by 60 points, and it also grants an 80% increase in fire resistance and poison immunity for 3 hours. The Dragon Serpent hamburger, plus 60 stats and 80% fire resistance, basically a nuke in a bun. Everyone sat together at the table and they thanked Inoa for the meal. Upon tasting it, Tia was surprised by the meal's amazing taste. Romaria remarked that the meat juices were incredible, and Fairy also shared the same thoughts. Inoa turned to the coachman, asking if he liked it too. With his cheeks full of food, the coachman said yes, adding that the moment he tasted it, the rich sauce and the flavor of the meat filled his entire mouth. He had never eaten anything that delicious before. Inoa was glad to hear it, and he told the coachman to eat as much as he liked because there was still more. The coachman was surprised, then, hesitatingly, he asked if he could have seconds. The coachman: "I'm not paid enough to eat monsters." Also the coachman: "Can I have seconds of this life-changing burger?" The rest of the girls joined in on the request, and Inoa was more than happy to grant it. After the meal, everyone was extremely full, especially Tia, who looked insanely pregnant. Romaria was shocked to see her stomach grow to that size, but Fairy wasn't surprised because she had eaten 30 of them. Tia ate like crazy and now looks like she's carrying a litter of tiger cubs. Inoa, on the other hand, was tired from cooking. Just then, the coachman told the group that it was time to depart. They were about halfway to the fortress now, and he would make sure to escort them safely. Meanwhile, in the eastern fortress, numerous guards lined up for the arrival of Alan and Trazia. Alan told Trazia that he would leave the defense of the rear gate to her, much to her surprise. She wondered why she wasn't assigned to the main gate, so Alan explained to her that they couldn't assume the enemy would attack head-on. Trazia, still believing that Alan was the genius that he was, agreed that he was right. Trazia is so blinded by hero worship that she'd believe Alan if he told her the sky was actually purple. Alan then turned to a soldier nearby, commanding him to guide Trazia. After that, he smiled at Trazia, telling her that he was counting on her. Trazia promptly responded, and she shortly left with the soldier Alan had spoken to earlier. As she went off, Alan asked some of the soldiers if those guys had already arrived. They confirmed it, and they offered to guide him to them. One of the soldiers turned to his comrade, wondering who Alan was talking about. The other soldier hadn't met the mysterious people in person either, but he guessed they were probably the hidden subordinates who served Lord Alan. Meanwhile, Alan followed a soldier to a hidden part of the fortress, and there he entered a cell with 4 individuals. They were a group of major criminals who nearly brought their homeland to ruin. The special mercenary unit, Disgrace. The god of war Garak called out to Alan, pointing out that he was late. The master of chain strikes, Vito, nonchalantly reminded Garak that he had just arrived himself. Garak was offended, so he called Vito a bastard and asked why he would say such a thing. Risharko, the skull crusher, annoyingly groaned at the boys' little quarrel. She didn't get why they would get mad even though the facts were true, which somehow convinced her that men were really trash. Despite the little chaos, the finger demon, or Telstella, simply remained quiet. The finger, what now? Just then, Alan smiled manically at his secret weapons. He called them sinners, reminding them that it was their turn to deliver the punishment. Alan calling them sinners while being the biggest sinner in the room is top-tier irony. Alan took a good look at the members of Disgrace, then he turned to Ortelstella, asking her about the rebels. Ortelstella presented her palm, and on it were 4 dots, one of them turning black. She explained that the reaction from the monster they sent to the west had been cut off, which seemed to mean it was defeated by the rebels. The world's most ominous GPS system for dead monsters. Alan's gaze narrowed, realizing that the enemy had shown up. Just then, he called upon the members of Disgrace, informing them that they would receive the rebels with a fortress-style defense. Each of them must prepare themselves and take their positions. Risharko was surprised by the fortress defense style that Alan suggested, as she thought that it would be better to go out from the west side and kill the rebels themselves. Vito agreed with Risharko, confident that they would wipe them out in seconds. Suddenly, Risharko called him out, threatening him not to say her name so casually because it disgusted her. Vito recoiled as if physically attacked, his eyes wide as if he had just lost his sanity. Words hurt way more than actual skull-crushing. Then he screamed back at Risharko, asking her what she said and calling her a shitty brat. Suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped, Risharko tilted her head, resting a cheek on her hand with a wink as she told Alan that only he was allowed to say her name. She's trying to flirt with a man whose only true love is a high-interest savings account. Alan simply dismissed her antics, steering the conversation back to the rebels that he wanted dead. He reminded the members of Disgrace that their primary mission was to prevent infiltration into the underground dungeon. Garak understood that there was no need to take unnecessary risks, which he assumed was what Alan meant. Alan confirmed it without hesitation, then he told everyone that he was counting on them. In unison, the members of Disgrace said yes. As Alan slowly exited the door, he peeked in once again, telling them not to let their guard down. When he finally left, Risharko wondered why Alan would be involved in human trafficking, although he was already a noble. Vito realized she was right, and he pointed out that it was definitely what one would call a risk. Suddenly, Risharko erupted in anger, asking why a man would react to her question. She was so infuriated that she told Vito to die. Not one to back down, Vito asked who the question was even directed at. There were only men there, and she was the only woman. Just then, Garak inserted himself into the conversation, suggesting that Alan's primary objective had always been money. This confused Risharko, as he already had plenty because he was a noble. As the rest of them tried to figure out Alan's intentions, Ortelstella only kept quiet, carefully listening to their thoughts. Garak believed that Alan's wealth was not enough, he needed more to rise even higher. Spoken like a true mercenary who knows exactly how expensive it is to hire a finger demon. With the members of Disgrace and Treza, the greatest military force that he possessed, there was no way a bunch of nobodies could stand up to him. He wouldn't allow anyone to interfere with his ambition. Meanwhile, Alan and the girls finally arrived at the Eastern Fort. As they planned, everyone assumed the characters that they were supposed to portray. Fairy and Tia were in chains, while Romeria followed Inoa around like his personal maid. Suddenly, he called out to the guards, introducing himself as the first son of a collateral branch of the Wishtal family, Roa Wishtal. On that day, by Alan's order, he came to present the runaway elf princess and a top-class beast woman. Before they proceeded to the crucial part of the plan, Inoa had told the girls that he would pretend to be someone else. It served as some kind of precaution, so he told them to call him Roa. Fairy thought that his acting was surprisingly good, while Tia mentally told herself not to call him by his true name. Luckily enough, the guard believed his little lie. The man went on to introduce himself as Dorman, the captain of the guard. He commended Inoa for a remarkable achievement, and Inoa promptly thanked him. The remarkable achievement of capturing Fairy and Tia only happened because they literally walked themselves into the chains. Just then, one of the subordinate guards suggested that they confirm this with Lord Alan, but Dorman insisted there was no need. Inoa's green noble outfit was proof of the Wishtal house, and besides, Alan was extremely busy. Apparently, wearing green is the ultimate security clearance. A matter of this level could be reported later. The subordinate guard yielded, and he let Dorman take care of the matter. With that, Dorman offered to personally tie up the elf and the beast woman in the cells. However, before he could touch the girls, Inoa abruptly slapped his hand away. Shocked, Dorman could only mutter his name in disbelief. Inoa firmly said that Tia and Fairy were his property, and he would be the one to take them and lock them in the cells. He asked Dorman if he understood, and the man nervously said yes. He raised his hands in surrender, apologizing as he did so. With that, he guided Anoa to the underground dungeon. Anoa released a sigh of relief, but a part of him still felt worried that the girls were offended by what he said. After all, he called them his property, as if they were being treated like objects. Unbeknownst to him, the girls were actually quite pleased that they were called his property. Just then, Dorman turned to Anoa, seemingly wanting to ask something. Anoa asked what it was, so Dorman gestured toward his maid. Anoa's eyes widened in horror, wondering if they had found out that Romaria was a former slave. Dorman's eyes widened in amazement as well, but for a completely different reason. He thought Romaria was an exceptionally beautiful woman, and she suited Anoa perfectly. Romaria, who was worried that the operation might go south, was so scared that she almost had a heart attack. Dorman was so charmed by Romaria that he didn't notice the collateral branch son was sweating bullets. Suddenly, Anoa told Dorman that he had enough chatter. He wanted the man to guide them already because he didn't have time to waste. Not long after, Dorman led them to a set of stairs that led underground. Anoa stared at the dark path before them, knowing that further ahead were Fairy and Romaria's companions. Just then Vito approached, calling Dorman an idiot and asking him what he was doing. Calling Dorman an idiot is the most accurate statement any mercenary in this unit has made all day. Anoa turned vigilant upon seeing Vito, and he wondered who he was and when he appeared. Angered by Dorman's carelessness, Vito raised his fist, screaming that he shouldn't just let anyone else in. However, as he released his forceful attack, he realized that he hadn't hit Dorman. His eyes widened in pure shock, seeing that Tia was standing before him, unscathed. She innocently said, "Oops," making it seem like it was a coincidence that her cuffs broke. About as coincidental as a meteor hitting a dinosaur. She assumed a fighting stance, smirking as she said she didn't know what happened. In return, Vito released a deadly aura, smiling at the interesting scene unfolding before him. Risharko walked into the room and noticed that only Vito was left. She was intrigued, wondering where that idiot Garak and Ortel Stella had gone. Vito replied that this was a monologue, but they had already headed to their assigned positions. Things finally made sense to Risharko, so she decided to go as well. If it was just that bastard and the old woman, they might lose to the rebels. However, Vito said no, explaining to Risharko that this was actually Garak's mission, something that only he alone could resolve without any trouble. Risharko was confused, so Vito reminded her that Garak was nicknamed the God of War because he had never lost a battle. Garak really nicknamed himself the God of War because local bully with a weird skill didn't hit the same. Elsewhere, Dorman kneeled before Garak, apologizing for his grave mistake. Seeing the look of fury flash in Garak's eyes, Dorman yelped in fear, ultimately running away before he met his end. He screamed as he left, despite Tia's warning for him to stop. Suddenly, Garak called out to Inoa and the girls, and his voice immediately sent a chill down their spines. He continued, asking if they were the rebels the boss was talking about. Inoa froze as Garak stared at them with evil intent, especially since his level was far beyond anything Erasmus could reach. This was the strongest fear he had ever felt in his life, and his instinct as a living being was telling him that this guy was dangerous. Just then Tia stepped forward, telling Inoa and the girls to fall back. Without fear, she asked Garak what the big deal was if he were right about his guess. Garak smirked, raising his hand as he vowed to kill them. Then without warning he lunged toward Tia, his speed barely traceable by the naked eye. With his eyes white from sheer concentration, Garak opened his palm to summon the Path of Slaughter, combining it with a high stance and 100 blood surfing's attack. Who named these moves? An edgy 14-year-old? However, despite the intensity of his attack, Tia was able to dodge it. Although he was stunned that she was able to avoid it, he wasn't done yet. He released a barrage of attacks, simultaneously raining them on Tia without stopping. His eyes narrowed as he noticed Tia's skillful footwork, and before he knew it, she was gone before him and had lunged into the air to avoid any attacks. Garak didn't dare stop there. In a split second, he appeared close to Tia's face, catching her off guard. Once again, he released the Path of Slaughter and middle stance combo attack, using it at full force to end Tia once and for all. However, Tia bounced back, narrowly avoiding it. As she staggered back, Garak followed the assault with Soul Dominion, a magic spell that seemed to come alive as he wielded its power. Soul Dominion sounds like a metal band that only plays in basements. Still, despite everything in Garak's book, Tia was able to dodge everything. Garak expressed his frustration, admitting that Tia had a very convenient tail. Tia, on the other hand, smiled at the thought of her opponent being quite skilled. Now it was her turn to attack. As she prepared her fighting stance, Garak smiled devilishly, recalling how Tia read the Path of Slaughter at first glance, which suggested that she was a formidable opponent. This excited him, so he waited for the thrilling fight to unfold. Tia channeled all her lightning powers to her fists, and when she finally came into close contact with Garak, she released everything without holding back. Garak didn't avoid the attack, taking it head-on as the entire room exploded like a nuke. When the dust finally settled, it was revealed that he was fully unscathed. To mock Tia further, he commented that it was a heavy, well-delivered punch. Just then, he flashed a psychotic smile, assuming that the deadly attack had drained Tia's strength. Tia was stunned, and when her friends noticed her reaction, they worriedly asked what was wrong. At that moment, Tia felt like her strength had suddenly drained away. Garak boasted that even if she noticed, it was already too late because her defeat had already been decided. Inoa, still caught in disbelief, suspected that this was a skill. Garak, who called him a brat, confirmed that he was correct. His skill, equivalent counter-absorption, had the ability to reduce the opponent's combat power for a certain period of time in proportion to the strength of the attacks he received. This shocked Inoa, as it meant that the more they attacked, the weaker they would become. The harder you hit me, the more I steal your lunch money. Given that, he now wondered how they were supposed to defeat him. Despite her team's panic, Tia remained calm, silently calculating her next move. Garak told her that there were two choices: attack uselessly and die, or surrender without attacking and die. Tia playfully thought about the choices he had given, but ultimately she knew that becoming weaker would be a problem. Just then, she looked back at her friends, certain that they would find a way to move forward. Garak erupted in laughter, claiming that no matter how much they thought about it, it was impossible for them to defeat him. Suddenly, his little monologue was interrupted by Tia, who was confident that she could win. With lightning surrounding her body, she reminded him that she was a sacred beast. Garak laughed so hard that his eyes seemed to gouge out. He was amused that she thought of herself as a sacred beast, and he reminded her that joking at a time like that was even funnier. He began to taunt her, telling her to try and win if she could. Tia, on the other hand, was irritated by his reaction because she was telling the truth. Before proceeding with the final battle with Garak, she turned to Inoa, telling her to be careful not to get electrocuted. Then, before Garak could even begin to process anything, Tia appeared behind him. As he hurriedly tried to protect himself, he tried to make sense of how she got that close. More importantly, how did he not see her? Garak really thought he was the main character until the background music changed. With a sudden forceful lunge, Tia wrapped her arms around him from behind, shocking everyone who witnessed it. Garak asked what she was doing, suspecting that she was trying to seduce him. With a smirk, he wondered if she planned to win using seduction. Tia, with a flat expression, said there was no way someone like him would interest her. Meanwhile, Inoa processed the electrocution warning that Tia had given her earlier. He had a firm guess, so he warned the girls to take cover. Memories of Inoa's laughter reflected in Tia's eyes as she summoned the ultimate assault, sacred technique. With her last bit of strength, she screamed that her master was far more wonderful than Garak. The world vanished into a blinding incandescent white as the omniversal thunder discharge tore through the sky. A roaring wall of electricity turned the battlefield into a jagged sea of light and heat, and Garak, who was at the center of the source, screamed in pure agony. Garak went from god of war to human lightning rod in 0.5 seconds. Nearby, sheltered beneath a magic tent that groaned under the pressure of the storm, Inoa and the girls huddled together. Inoa let out a shaky breath, his face pale as he watched the devastation through the canvas. "That was close," he muttered, the words barely audible over the crackling air. If Garak could be defeated in a single attack, then it didn't matter if his skill weakened Tia. Even so, he never imagined she could be that strong. After the onslaught, Tia happily waved back to the group, amused by their nice tent. Just then, a striking realization hit her. She was almost out of strength. To Inoa's surprise, Tia told him that she would leave the rest of the fight to him and Fairy. The two blankly stared at her, and when the truth finally sank in, they both screamed in panic. High atop the fortress rooftop, Alan asked Ortelstella if she heard the sound of a lightning strike, but she believed it was merely thunder because the area was at high elevation. Alan seemed to have his doubts, so Ortelstella reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. They would take care of the rebels, and they wouldn't allow them to interfere with him. Finally feeling at ease, Alan redirected his thoughts on the investments he had made to make his plans happen. Funding military force and covert operations, a meticulous plan laid out over many years. Finally, it was bearing fruit. He let out a maniacal laugh, exhilarated at the thought that it wouldn't be long until the kingdom of Valis would become his. Ortelstella laughed along with him, agreeing that the future they longed for would come soon. Her laughing along with him is peak "I'm just here for the benefits package" energy. Elsewhere, Inoa and the girls carried on with their mission. As they went along, Romeria noticed that Inoa seemed tense, so she asked what was bothering him. He stopped for a moment, wondering if they could defeat the enemy without Tia. Fairy thought his worries were valid, as she also thought that it was a mistake for Tia, the strongest among them, to be the one who fought. Inoa didn't think so because they had no other way to defeat Garak anyway. And besides, Tia was the only one who could finish him in a single blow, so it was undoubtedly the best decision. Just then Tia chimed in, telling her friends not to worry. She believed that if the three of them joined forces, they could defeat any enemy. Inoa didn't seem to think so, but Tia meant what she said. With a firm voice, she told them that she believed in them all. Inoa, Romeria, and Fairy stared at her with disbelief, clearly in shock that she had that much faith in them. Inoa's resolve strengthened, especially now that Tia had vocalized that she trusted them. He convinced himself to stop thinking about whether they could win or not. Inoa thanked Tia, then he urged the team to push through with the mission. He led the way, determined to win no matter who the opponent was. Not long after, the group finally reached the fortress underground sublevel. Tia immediately sniffed out the smell of blood, which intrigued Inoa. Fairy's mind roamed wild, paranoid at the thought that Fred could be heavily injured. Without thinking ahead, she ran forward to trace the scent, leaving the rest of the group worried. She ran toward a nearby cell, but she didn't find Fred or any of the other captives there. The massive cell was empty, filled only with bloodied cuffs and torture devices. Anoa, stuttering at the horrific scene before him, asked what the place even was. Romaria shakily explained that they were in the torture chamber, which seemed eerily familiar because she had been whipped there before. Tia softly muttered her name and asked if she would be okay. Romaria fell weak to her knees, so Anoa handed her a bottle and told her to drink it. Romaria falling to her knees is the most realistic reaction to seeing your old workplace/torture chamber. It was tea with a calming effect which was gathered at the spiritual peak of Erasmus. With promises of mental stability and stress relief, Romaria chugged the whole thing down. Meanwhile, Tia's super hearing sensed the presence of an intruder. She warned the others about it, but before they could hide, someone suddenly stepped out of the shadows. A man dressed in his shattered armor staggered forward. The group stood still, waiting for the rest of the scene to unfold. The man, bloodied and beat up, desperately reached out to them and asked for help. Then, out of nowhere, a giant hammer slammed over the man, squashing him like a bug. Blood and human remains splattered all over the place, leaving Anoa stunned. Risharko, who wielded the giant hammer, was excited to see cute girls in the room. Vito, on the other hand, simply stood there in his usual brooding mood. Just then Risharko spotted Anoa, and she expressed her disgust at seeing a male among them. Suddenly, Vito spoke, seemingly disappointed that the rebels they were informed of were mere children. He opened his palms, saying that life was permanent. Vito out here dropping philosophical bars while standing next to a blood splatter. He then clasped his hands together and muttered a chilling monologue. So that you may reincarnate as soon as possible, I will send you to the afterlife, praying for you. Inoa started to break out into a cold sweat, knowing that the people before them were just as dangerous as Garruk. An ominous aura lingered around Risharko and Vito, proving just how impossible it was to defeat their combined forces. Just then, Fulre's hand tightened into a fist, signaling that she would attack first. As she readied her staff, Inoa prepared to jump into the fight with her. Before heading off to battle, he told Tia to protect Romaria. Tia promised to do her part, then she told Anoa that she would leave everything to him. Anoa and Fairy looked back for a short moment, reassuring Tia that her sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Meanwhile, Risharko scoffed at the thought that the useless Garruk had been defeated after all. You can say he's a disgrace. Vito replied that it seemed so, but Risharko only found it repulsing that he talked back to her. She went on to complain that she hated fighting alongside men, so she told Vito to do it alone. Vito looked back at her in disbelief, so Risharko taunted him further, suggesting that he couldn't win without her help. Vito didn't mutter a word, seemingly stunned by the little girl's snide remarks. On the other side of the battlefield, Inoa suggested that they move at the same time and cause confusion. Upon confirming that she understood, the two immediately executed their plan, darting off from their positions without warning. Farai swiftly released the Chorus-style demon-slaying archery technique, pairing it with the resonance of the observer attack. Multiple arrows glided through the air like deadly projectiles, making their way toward Vito. Vito remained in the same spot, still offended by the stupid idea that Risharko believed he might lose. Just then his muscles bulged and rippled with a terrifying intensity, his skin hardening into something that resembled stone more than flesh. The projectile snapped and crumbled upon impact, falling to the ground like harmless toothpicks. Fairy's demon-slaying archery hit Vito and he basically treated them like a minor skin exfoliation. On the sidelines, Fairy and Anoa watched in paralyzed shock. Vito transcended the limits of the human form, his muscles swelling as 6 additional arms erupted from his back. With each arm holding its own sword, he firmly believed that there was no possible way that 8 arms could lose to 4. As Vito's 8 arms extended behind him in a nightmarish display, Anoa and Fairy struggled to process their next move. Fairy stared with bewilderment, still unable to comprehend that her opponent had 8 arms. Anoa was just as shocked, unaware that there really was a race like that. Vito called out the rude remark, he was not a human, much less a saint. Yeah, the 6 extra arms were a bit of a giveaway, Sherlock. This was his ability, the power of the 8 arms. Anoa, having mustered the courage to speak up, asked who he was. Risharko, who had completely stepped away from the battlegrounds to take a nap, allowed Vito to do all the heavy work. Vito answered Inoa, explaining that they were the special mercenary unit directly subordinate to Lord Alan Disgrace. Tia, Romaria, and Fairy simultaneously stared at Inoa, who seemed very affected by what he heard. Tia assumed that the guy from earlier was a member of Disgrace, which Vito confirmed. He went on to commend Tia for defeating him, but her expression remained flat, her tongue poking out in a mocking, childish gesture as she made it clear she didn't value praise from someone like him. Suddenly, Inoa asked Vito why he obeyed Alan, suggesting that he didn't know what kind of man he was. Without shame, Vito bluntly revealed that they knew exactly what kind of man Alan was. Disgrace was a group formed by people who were cast aside in their homelands, and Lord Alan welcomed them with open arms. Then out of nowhere, Vito broke into tears, crying at the thought of Alan being equivalent to a god. Imagine being so deep in a pyramid scheme you think the CEO is a deity. Inoa could only stare in disbelief, still baffled by the unlikely comparison his opponent had mentioned. To Vito, Lord Alan understood and respected his faith, his divine doctrine. As a memento for the afterlife, he would tell Inoa a noble story from the past that determined the shape of his existence. When he was serving as a priest in his homeland, he was present at an official inspection to verify birth records. At the time, the officials, in order to issue the documents, moved the sacred scriptures placed on the lectern without permission. Vito reprimanded them, saying that it was blasphemy against the gods. Then they gave a faint smile, offering a cheap apology, nothing more than words. Vito restrained the boiling rage inside him and instead prayed for divine punishment to descend upon them. However, that punishment never came. Just as the work was about to finish, he understood it. Since the gods were busy, sometimes they couldn't intervene. Therefore, it was necessary for him to take their place. That was what it meant to be a messenger of the gods, a priest. Taking matters into his own hands, Vito killed the blasphemers, tearing them apart without mercy. After that, he was expelled from his country. It was deemed evil to punish a fool who had challenged the gods. Vito's noble story is literally just him being a Karen in a temple until he started swinging. Vito asked Inoa if he found that strange, but the boy only asked if he was being serious. Just for something like that, Vito killed people. He questioned the punishment he had chosen, including his divine faith. To him, no matter how many pretty words Vito used, he was nothing more than a murderer. Veins roared in Vito's face as he took the verbal lashing, prompting him to ask what the boy had just said. He stood his ground, his 8 arms bristling with heavy steel as he tried to control his anger. He argued that the sacred scriptures were fragments of God itself, and for vulgar people to touch them was a barbaric and unforgivable act. Now he understood that Inoa and the rest of his gang were nothing more than atheists. Just then he crossed his primary blades before his face, his frame trembling with the sheer force of his killing intent. Losing his sense of humanity, he vowed that he would tear them to pieces. His deadly aura erupted from his body as if he were on fire. As Inoa observed him, one thing was made clear: they definitely couldn't let him go free. Just then he looked over to Fairy, whose aura was noticeably swirling through her body. Thanks to his long monologue, she had more than enough time to focus her magical power. Vito talked so long, Fairy had time to charge her mana, check her emails, and finish a 3-course meal. Vito barely had time to register the shift in the air before Fairy's preparation reached its violent conclusion. With a sharp, commanding cry, she unleashed her built-up mana in a single focused burst. As everything in sight got swallowed in flames, she decided that if consecutive attacks wouldn't work, then all they had to do was crush Vito with a single heavy blow. With white piercing, Fairy launched herself forward, her speed far beyond what the naked eye could follow. The ground beneath her feet fractured on impact. Unable to withstand the force of her acceleration, Inoa braced himself, planting his feet firmly as he watched in stunned disbelief. When they were fighting the serpent, he was too far away to notice it, but now it was clear that her technique had so much power. As the flames raged and the shockwaves rippled through the battlefield, the aftermath of her onslaught spoke for itself. By all accounts, it was more than enough to defeat Vito. Vito stood at the center of the battlefield, shrouded in swirling smoke, his silhouette barely resembling anything human. Against his 8 arms, an attack like Fairy's meant nothing. As the spear of light reached him, he threw his 8 blades forward and called upon the divine protection of the 8 blades. He believed that the power of blades in which a god dwelled would make Fairy learn everything the hard way. The radiant spear crashed against his 8-armed guard, erupting into a blinding burst of light that swallowed the battlefield whole. The sheer force halted the projectile completely, stopping it in its tracks. When the dust finally settled, the truth became impossible to deny. Fairy's white piercing attack had been blocked. Fairy really spent 3 business days charging that mana just to deliver a miss. She stood there, stunned, unable to process what she had just witnessed. Nearby, Inoa was just as shaken. Even he hadn't doubted the power behind that strike. Now as he stared at the monstrous figure before them, one thing became painfully clear. They would have to find some way to break through Vito's defense. The duel entered its next phase as Vito emerged from Fairy's devastating attack completely unscathed. With a confident grin, he declared that it was now his turn. Inoa watched him closely, analyzing every movement. One thing was painfully clear. Unless they found a way to deal with Vito's 8 arms, their attacks wouldn't hit him. Just then, Vito focused for a moment, trying to decide who to take out first. Then, without warning, he moved. In an instant, he lunged forward, his focus locked onto the archer. Inoa shouted a warning, but Fairy didn't budge. She held her ground and fired another arrow, forcing Vito to deflect it mid-charge. Even so, he didn't slow down. Fairy was alarmed by what she saw. Vito was fast, which meant she wouldn't have enough time to concentrate her magic. From a short distance, Vito gathered his power, drawing everything into a single point as he prepared his ultimate attack. 8 hardening. Fairy's eyes widened in shock, seemingly too stunned to act in time. Then, to her surprise, she didn't feel Vito's power obliterate her to pieces. Between her and Vito stood something completely out of place. A simple table. It had taken the full brunt of the attack, shielding her at the last possible second and saving her life. Seeing what just happened, Vito expressed his confusion at seeing a table on the battlefield. "Vito, I will obliterate you." "Inoa, best I can do is a coffee table." He looked back to see that Inoa had summoned it, making him wonder if it was his ability. He groaned that it was such a pain, then decided that he would change targets instead. Vito closed the distance in a blink, looming over Inoa like an 8-armed titan. Inoa acted fast, summoning a table out of thin air. As soon as the item manifested before him, he hurled it toward Vito without hesitation. However, Vito knew too well to let the same tricks work twice. Inoa was stunned, seeing how Vito struggled to cut the table in half. But this didn't stop him, as he decided to knock it aside instead. Noticing that his opponent attacked at the same time he broke his defense, Inoa summoned a cutting board shield barrier in all directions. Vito was caught off guard, admitting the cleverness of summoning a shield that he couldn't knock away. Inoa, however, could barely maintain his form due to how hard it was to keep up, probably from the sheer embarrassment of winning a fight with home decor. He had to keep his distance for a while, so he decided to use a camp action to do the job. Using his ignite skill, a massive tower of flame appeared before Vito, forcing him to fall back. Having witnessed a pillar of fire and a shield made of furniture, Vito couldn't help but comment that it was a strange ability. Meanwhile, Inoa tried to analyze his next strategy. Attacking while breaking defenses, this was a fighting style that was only possible because his opponent had 8 arms. Just then, a realization struck him. It wasn't that Vito blocked it with 8 arms, it was that he could block it because he had 8 arms. Inoa's gaze narrowed, convinced that the plan he had in mind was worth it. Inoa realized that Vito's 8 arms are just a very crowded hitbox waiting to be mismanaged. Just then he called out to Fairy and they huddled for a brief moment to discuss his plan. Vito mocked them, saying that no matter how much they planned, the outcome wouldn't change. He looked at his opponents from afar, pitying their situation. Meanwhile, Risharko continued to observe the whole fight, seemingly uninterested in working alongside Vito. Inoa told Fairy that they would go according to plan, and she nodded in agreement. Without wasting a second, Fairy used the Kairos style and demon hunting bow technique, adding in a wind resonance attack for more power. Vito received the attack head-on, using his 8 arms to mock Fairy's choice of using the technique again. Despite Vito's criticisms, Fairy carried on, using the same techniques on him. When she finally gained momentum, she fired the white piercing attack again, causing the atmosphere above them to bend to her whim. Vito, on the other hand, reminded her that her attacks wouldn't work on him. To prove his point, he invoked the divine protection of the 8 blades, pouring his strength into a full defensive stance that effortlessly met her pressure head-on. Inoa stood firmly behind Fairy, but Vito was quick to notice him. This led him to suspect that they would launch a surprise attack, so he decided to use his technique to dodge the pillar of fire. True enough, Inoa used his ignite skill, but Vito, having predicted his next move, caught it with his bare hands. The force alone was enough to send him skidding backward, yet he still managed to hold his footing. As his muscles strained under the weight of the fireball, he decided to deflect the arrow that was fast approaching. He wasn't threatened by Inoa and Fairy, thinking that in the end they were just kids. Vito narrowed his eyes, irritation flickering across his expression as he wondered why the boy would be smiling in a situation like this. That question didn't last long, however, because the reason was already unfolding right in front of him. Before Vito could fully process what had happened, something crucial slipped past his awareness. 2 of his arms were suddenly gone. A spray of blood burst into the air as the severed limbs flew back, and only then did the reality register. He suddenly spotted an arrow strike on the ground, leading him to suspect that it came from behind. Stuck in disbelief, he wondered what this meant. From a distance, Risharko observed the scene with a lazy glance, almost unimpressed. She casually pointed out that it was a delayed attack. In the first attack, she left a single arrow floating in the air without letting it hit. Vito was stunned, leaving Risharko disappointed because he didn't even notice something so obvious. Bro, you have 8 arms but apparently 0 peripheral vision. With a disgusted look printed on her face, she muttered that this was exactly why men were trash. Vito clicked his tongue in irritation, but no rebuttal came. Across the battlefield, Inoa quietly absorbed the exchange, stunned that Risharko had noticed all of it and said nothing until now. She really waited for him to get maimed just to make a point. Just then, Vito looked forward, boasting that 2 arms less was nothing more than a scratch. Fairy taunted him in response, daring him to block her attack at that very moment. Vito angrily screamed, "Fine," challenging her to bring it on. She pushed everything she had left into her bow, mana swirling violently around her as white streams of energy wrapped around her body. The air itself seemed to distort as she invoked the white piercing technique once more, guiding all her remaining power into a single shot. In the next instant, the arrow traveled through the space between them, uprooting the floor as it made its way across with immense speed. Vito prepared himself to receive the attack, channeling the divine protection of the 8 blades once again. He grunted as the attack landed on his body, but he retained his resolve, claiming that a messenger of God like him would not lose to some fatherless children. Inoa smiled as he witnessed Vito being pushed back. Just as he thought, that technique only worked because he had 8 arms. Now that he was missing 2, they could pierce him. Without giving Vito even a moment to recover, Inoa seized the opening and fired again, landing a clean hit that drove him further back. The impact finally sent him crashing down, signaling what looked like the end of the fight. Tia and Romaria immediately cheered, relief breaking through the tension as they celebrated Inoa and Fari's victory. Inoa happily announced that they did it, but as he turned to see Fairy's reaction, she suddenly collapsed from immense exhaustion. As she fell face first on the floor, Inoa realized that the end was far from over. Behind him, the bloodied Vito emerged from the dust, beaten up yet refusing to accept defeat. Despite losing a fraction of his torso and 2 of his arms, he claimed that something like that wasn't enough to finish him. Inoa was caught in disbelief, struggling to comprehend that he was still moving after taking the attacks. Vito wanted to say more, but he was interrupted by the slam of a massive hammer on his head. The force was so overwhelming that his body was instantly launched out of sight, crashing hard into the opposite wall. Inoa and the girls stood there, all shocked, unable to comprehend what had just happened. From the settling dust, Risharko stepped forward casually, her enormous hammer now stained with Vito's blood. With a calm, almost indifferent tone, she declared that there was no god. Vito, I refuse to accept defeat. Risharko, I refuse to let you keep talking. Squash. Inoa was stunned, wondering what was wrong with the girl. She was supposed to be allies with Vito after all. Before anyone could question further, Risharko pointed at Fairy and ordered her to rest in a corner. She added that she didn't want to fight the beast girl or the maid either, since she disliked fighting girls. Then her gaze shifted and she pointed at Inoa. Her expression alone was enough to make the air feel heavier. With a chilling certainty, she warned the girls that when his corpse was torn to pieces, that would be their signal to retreat. Inoa summoned a magic sleeping bag, Eversleep, which had HP and mana recovery speed while in use and recovered status ailments while in use. As Fairy recovered in the sleeping bag, she apologized to Inoa because it looked like she had run out of mana. As her condition stabilized, Fairy weakly apologized, admitting that she had completely run out of mana. Inoa shook his head, then he turned to Tia, asking her to stay by Fairy's side. Tia nodded without hesitation, promising that she would take responsibility. Inoa also apologized to Fairy for causing trouble, then he told her to get some good rest. He also turned to Romaria, telling her to rest as well. Before the moment could settle, Risharko's irritated voice cut through the air. She told Inoa to hurry up, clearly annoyed at being kept waiting. Men, in her eyes, always made women wait, and that alone was enough to irritate her further. Her face twisted in disgust as she muttered that men really were idiots. Romaria stared at her in silence for a moment, then suddenly snapped. She fired back, insisting that Inoa wasn't an idiot. This is the first time she's found her spine this entire mission. For a brief second, Risharko's expression softened. To her, it only meant that Romaria didn't yet understand what kind of creatures men truly were. 3 years ago, in the village where Risharko lived, there was a custom that everyone with combat skills was raised as a soldier. Her skill apparently was a weapon that grows stronger the more hatred you feel towards someone. Risharko hadn't managed to manifest it, and honestly, she didn't want to become a soldier. Back then, Dan, her friend, had laughed it off, telling her she was simply too kind. He reassured her that she didn't need to fight or use such a skill. When the time came, he would protect her instead. Risharko blankly stared at him, then she asked if she could really trust in his skill to make things shine. Dan answered that this was why he practiced swordsmanship every day. Besides, skills depended on how one used them. Just then, he took a stone from the ground and tied a string around it, turning it into a little necklace. He put it around Risharko's neck, then he imbued it with magic. The necklace glowed, surprising Risharko. She took the stone in her hands, stunned that it looked like a jewel. Dan explained that it was a charm. Even if his skill wasn't useful in combat, he could at least protect her that way. Although a bit hesitant, he asked Risharko if she still didn't trust that he could protect her with his skill. She bluntly said no, which caught Dan in disbelief. Risharko saying no to trusting him immediately is the most self-aware thing she's ever done. Without remorse, she explained to him that she didn't believe in that kind of spiritual stuff. But still, she thanked him. She peered closely at Dan's face, which slightly made him nervous. Later at training, Risharko's trainer encouraged her to attack him with her skills. She apologized as she couldn't use her skill properly. One of the other trainers consulted with Risharko's trainer, and they believed that her skill's effectiveness could only work depending on her hatred for the target, and so they resorted to horrible methods of torture to bring out her skills. All of the male trainers agreed to this. They dunked Risharko's head in the river, convinced that this was for the good of the village. As she struggled to keep hold of her breath, the trainers told her to release her hatred she must hate. While her head was under the water, she could only hope for someone to help her. When they finally let her up for a breath of air, she desperately called out to the one person who could save her, Dan. However, the men told her that he wouldn't come even if she called for him. He wasn't in the village at that moment, and even if he were, he would have to step in to stop them. Some of the trainers suspected that he ran away, which stunned Risharko. The torture went on for so long that the little charm that Dan gave eventually got lost in the water. And that's the exact moment the "he's coming to save me" meter hit 0%. The truth hit Risharko like a bullet. He didn't come, he ran away. She still couldn't believe it because he said he'd protect her. He promised. The voices of the trainers echoed in Risharko's mind. They seemed like evil entities, convincing her that her sacrifice was for the good of the village and that it was for her own good. She was told to become a soldier, be grateful, and to release her hatred. She also thought about Dan, and it pained her the most. At that moment, Risharko, who was betrayed by everyone she knew, decided never to trust again. At one point, even the trainers began to worry. One of them suggested giving Risharko a break, fearing that she might actually die if they kept going. Reluctantly, they pulled her out of the water. The moment she was released, Risharko collapsed forward, coughing violently as she struggled to expel the water from her lungs. One of the trainers asked if she could use her skill now, but she coldly told him to shut up. Fueled by rage, Risharko awakened her powers, towering over the animals who made her suffer. Men. The men in that village found out the law of the jungle real fast. In the next moments, a loud explosion was heard from miles away, its incredible strength visible as black smoke reaching the skies. The women fled, escaping the destruction, while the men, those who had pushed her to this point, were left behind. When it was over, the battlefield fell silent. At the center of it all stood Risharko, unmoving. Her body was drenched in blood, her gigantic hammer resting at her side, the very embodiment of her awakened skill. Recalling her past, she stood firm in her belief that all men are trash. Someday, she thought, Romaria would understand too. Still, Romaria argued that Anoa wasn't one of the men that Risharko spoke about. However, Anoa stopped her mid-sentence, trying to spare her from Risharko's wrath. He stood in front of her, and he advised her to step back. Romaria was stunned. To raise his spirits for the fight that was about to ensue, Romaria told him that she truly trusted him. Anoa smiled, thanking her. After that, Romaria entered the tent with the other girls, leaving Anoa to face Risharko. Meanwhile, Risharko scoffed at Romaria's statement, believing that Anoa would eventually abandon her too. Anoa asked if that was what she truly thought, but this question seemed to confuse Risharko. So Anoa continued, admitting that after everything she went through, it wasn't strange for her to think that way. Risharko spat back, saying that he didn't know anything. She channeled her powers, warning Anoa not to act like he understood how she felt. Then, out of nowhere, the hammer of resentment manifested in her hands, its evil powers smashing on the floor and destroying it. Filled with anger and resentment, she screamed for Anoa to die. She's literally swinging the weight of her entire village's betrayal at Anoa's head. As Risharko rushed forward to land the first strike, Anoa acted fast, summoning a tent-stake hammer to appear. In a mere second, Risharko appeared before Anoa, not hesitating to slam the giant hammer on him. Anoa met the attack head-on, using the tent-stake hammer to counter its power. As he tried to carry the weight of Risharko's attack, he pointed out that she was different from the other members of Disgrace, so she must not stay by Alan's side. Offended that Anoa told her not to stay by Alan's side, Risharko asked Anoa who he thought he was. She slammed her hammer over him again, but this time Anoa noticed that it got bigger. She unleashed a relentless barrage of attacks, screaming at him to stop spouting nonsense. Each strike carried overwhelming force, far beyond what Anoa could properly defend against. He was driven back, unable to withstand the assault until a final blow sent him flying across the room. Romaria cried out his name in alarm, while Tia remained silent, carefully observing the fight unfold. Anoa harshly landed on the opposite wall, which was visibly cracked. He mustered the courage to stand again, though he hated to admit that Risharko had incredible strength. On the opposite side of the room, Risharko asked Anoa what he could possibly know about Alan. Without hesitation, he revealed that he was Alan's son, the one who knew best what kind of person he was. Risharko's gaze narrowed, trying to assess if he was telling the truth. He tried to look for the resemblance by picturing Alan's face beside Anoa's. Anoa insisted that it was true. As a father, Alan may have been the worst, and if Risharko knew that, she might just change her mind. However, Risharko firmly believed that Alan didn't have that shallow sense of justice like the people in her village. From the very beginning, he treated her as nothing more than a tool, and that, to her, was a great relief. That is a level 100 Stockholm Syndrome moment right there. Anoa replied that maybe it was a relief, but it wouldn't last long. Risharko argued that it will, but Anoa retorted that someday she would suffer again. Still refusing to yield, Risharko said that it would never happen, but Anoa told her that she was just driven insane. Risharko refused to accept that she went crazy. She just opened her eyes. Anoa refused to give up, and he insisted that she still had time to start over. Risharko didn't argue with Anoa any further. She believed that despite being Alan's son, he was the complete opposite of him. Just like he did with Vito, he always acted like he was the one who was right. Just then she asked him if he really thought his pretty words were gonna save anyone. Talk is cheap, but this 5-ton hammer is free. Suddenly, Risharko raised her hammer with one hand, its size even bigger than the previous minute. Anoa froze for a split second, fully realizing the scale of what he was about to face. Risharko, now angrier than ever, screamed that men like him were exactly the ones she hated the most. Without holding back, she released the collapse strike attack. As the hammer made its way to him, Anoa wondered what he should do. If he considered the power from earlier, a plank or a table might not be enough to block the attack. Suddenly, an idea came to mind. He wouldn't take the attack, but send it back. Acting quickly, he summoned a hammock to appear above him. Anoa really decided to play a high-stakes game of Angry Birds Self-Defense Edition. Just like clockwork, the hammock received the full strength of the collapse strike attack. making it bounce against the giant strings. Risharko was confused, wondering what the item before her was. "It's for naps, girl. Something you clearly haven't had in 3 years." Meanwhile, Inoa noticed that the strings were starting to tear, and he could only hope that they would hold on. True enough, the hammer started to push back, much to Risharko's worry. With a violent recoil, the hammer was flung backward, dragging Risharko along with it. She was sent crashing into the ground, the impact echoing through the room. Only then did Inoa finally catch his breath. When the dust cleared, Risharko was still alive, but badly injured. She cursed Inoa for using techniques that made no sense. Then she repeatedly muttered how annoying the situation was. She started a rant on how weak men actually were. But before she could continue, Romaria intervened, calling her out. Inoa was surprised to see her on the battlefield, so he reminded her to go back inside. Romaria apologized, but she had to ask Risharko something. With a flat expression, Risharko asked what she wanted. Romaria mentioned Dan, wondering if he actually ran away. Romaria stepped onto a battlefield covered in blood and hammer craters just to ask for a source citation. Risharko simply answered that he did, seemingly sure about it. Just then, Romaria asked again, did Dan personally tell her that? The question stopped Risharko cold. Romaria asked what exactly Dan had said, but Risharko's mind had already wandered off. On that fateful day, Dan arrived late and immediately went to see her. He smiled as he apologized for being late, but this didn't change her mind. She hated the fact that he showed up late, and she vowed never to forgive him. Dan informed her that he went to see the mayor who was at the council, which meant she didn't have to fight anymore. Risharko didn't say anything, her mind being filled with thoughts of men being scum and trash. Dan noticed that she was covered in blood, so he worriedly asked what happened. The past struck Risharko in silence. Everything she did came back to her, and now she wondered why she did that to Dan. She remembered striking him with her hammer, but she also recalled the times she spent with him as a child. Memories of Dan's laughter echoed back, and now, looking at Inoa, those thoughts got amplified. Risharko was so busy hating all men that she accidentally deleted the one guy who actually had her back. Risharko fell to her knees, weak against her past. The massive hammer she once wielded shrank in her grip, reduced to something no bigger than a toy as she pressed it weakly against Inoa's chest. Inoa told her that she couldn't be forgiven for what she did, but even so, he couldn't abandon her. Risharko wept like a defeated child, saying that she didn't expect to be forgiven. As her emotions unraveled, the hammer in her hand continued to shrink. Bit by bit it lost its form until it slipped from her grasp entirely and dissolved into nothing. After the fight with Risharko, Inoa immediately checked in on Fairy. He asked Romaria and Tia how she was doing, and they informed him that she still hadn't woken up but seemed to have recovered quite a bit. Inoa understood, feeling quite relieved by it. Tia volunteered to carry Fairy on her back, but Inoa told her not to push herself. Tia agreed that he was right, as her current power had been drained after her fight with Garuk. Inoa instead said that it was a problem. Then he took Fairy on his back, deciding to carry her himself. Before they could leave, Risharko stopped them, asking what their objective was. Inoa replied that they came to rescue the elves and a girl who was trapped in the fortress. Risharko pondered for a moment. Then she pointed at the exit behind her, informing them that the cells were up ahead. Inoa seemed stunned, so Risharko called him out before he could say anything else. She irritably told him not to misunderstand, it wasn't like she was trying to help him. Suddenly her expression changed. With a numb tone she told everyone that she just stopped caring. The universal mood after a mental breakdown and a hammock-related injury. Without waiting for them to respond, she turned her back, telling them to try not to die. Inoa said the same thing to her, which made her stop in her tracks. She briefly looked at him, then turned around again, smiling. Without looking back, she told him that he was really annoying. Inoa was caught off guard, so Risharko, while laughing, reminded him that she still hated men. She soon walked out of the room, eventually disappearing into the shadows. As she left, Romaria pointed out that if Risharko had realized it sooner, she would still be with Dan. Just then, Inoa shifted their focus back to their mission, trying not to keep the elves and Romilia waiting any longer. He led the way, urging the girls to hurry. Elsewhere, Risharko was interrogated about the other bandits. She didn't answer, but instead opened up her plan about leaving the group. She skipped the part where she smashed her coworker with a gigantic hammer. Meanwhile, Inoa and the group finally arrived at the cells, which were heavily guarded. From the sidelines, Inoa noticed that the cells were nearby, so he asked Romaria if she was okay. She confirmed that she was, thanks to the tea that he had given her. She wasn't scared at all, much to Inoa's relief. Inoa then pointed out that there were only 2 guards, which worked in their favor. He pointed at a blind spot, telling the girls to hide there for a moment while he put Fairy down. Shortly after, Inoa stepped out into the light, revealing himself to the guards. They asked if he were Roa, and he confirmed it. The guards claimed to have already heard about him, but they were now wondering where the elven princess or the beast woman was. Fred, who overheard the conversation from inside the cell, perked up when they mentioned a princess. Inoa explained to the guards that the princess had fainted, since they didn't give her any food. He hoped that the guards could help him carry her. They were surprised to hear about the situation, but they agreed to assist Inoa. As they made their way to Fairy, one of the guards pointed out that his body was full of wounds. Inoa briefly explained that he just fell, Then he shifted the topic, informing the guards that the princess and the beast woman were just past the corner. Inoa explaining his massive battle wounds like he tripped on a rug is peak. Nothing to see here. Energy. However, when they reached the said corner, the guards found nothing there. Inoa smiled devilishly behind them, waiting to execute his plan. In the next moment, the other guard overheard a pained grunt, so he quickly ran to his comrade's aid, wondering what had just happened. Before he could make sense of everything, Inoa knocked him down too. Inoa is out here handing out participation trophies for being knocked out. Soon after, Inoa tied the guards together, preventing them from meddling any further. He then took the key, and the girls congratulated him for a job well done. Romeria was especially hyped up, thinking that he was very impressive. After that, they searched for the elves and Romelia, but as they made their way through the corridors, Inoa noticed that there were other slaves too. Just then, Tia spotted the elves, and she immediately informed the group about it. Inoa was stunned upon seeing them. They had the same pointed ears as Fairy, and they had delicate features. Inoa called out to the elves, but before he could say anything else, Fred suddenly bolted toward the bars, sneering at him like a rabid beast. He cursed Inoa for being a cruel noble, and he despised him for what he did to the princess. Because of that, he angrily threatened to kill him. Inoa anxiously told him that it was a misunderstanding, but Fred didn't budge. He told Inoa not to play dumb. With those noble clothes, he was one of that bearded guy's accomplices too. Then to Fred's surprise, a familiar voice cut through his angered rant. It was Fairy, jokingly telling him that he looked good. She tried her best to keep her eyes open, trying to reassure the rest of the elves that she was fine. They looked at her with tears in their eyes, relieved to know that she had survived after their village's downfall. Inoa asked Fairy if she was okay now, and she replied that she was much better thanks to his amazing sleeping bag. If Inoa doesn't start a camping brand after this, he's wasting his talent. Inoa understood, but he still couldn't help but say sorry for making her push herself so much. Fairy smiled, telling him not to worry because she was glad to help. Noticing her people's loud cries, she told Inoa that they should probably release them already. Seeing the look on the elves' faces, Inoa mentioned that she was really popular. They didn't waste a single second further. They unlocked the cells and freed the elves from their chains, finally allowing them to reunite with their beloved princess. One particular elf still hadn't moved on from the fact that she was safe, and he kept on crying about it. Meanwhile, Fairy hugged Fred, feeling at ease that he was safe along with everyone else. On the sidelines, Tia, Inoa, and Romaria stood silently as they observed the happy reunion. Just then, Inoa stepped in, raising his hand as he told them that it was time to restore everyone's energy. He immediately whipped up a meal. With Erasmus's dried meat, a medical herb soup, and milk porridge, he encouraged the elves to fill their stomachs. Fred was unamused, and he asked if he was seeing food. Inoa didn't explain further, he just urged them to eat. Fred and the rest of the elves didn't take his invitation right away, as they still didn't trust him. Fairy quickly called them out, reminding them that Inoa and the girls were her companions and saviors, so they should accept them with gratitude. The doubtful elves immediately slammed their heads to the ground in apology, and they thanked Inoa for the food. Thanks for the porridge, sorry for the death threats. After eating, the elves found that their wounds had immediately healed. One of the male elves flexed his muscles, thrilled that strength was flowing through his body. With the elves freed and their strength restored, Inoa decided that it was time to go and rescue Romelia. He told Fairy to stay with everyone else, as they probably had a lot to talk about. Fairy agreed, but before leaving, Inoa left her with some camping tools which could be used as weapons in case the soldiers came. With that, Inoa took Romaria and Tia with him, and they told Fairy that they would be right back. Fairy bid them goodbye, and she reminded them to be careful. Elsewhere, Romelia was isolated in a cell, worriedly muttering her mother's name. Suddenly, Inoa stepped forward, asking if she was Romelia. He explained that they came on behalf of Reina to rescue her. As expected, Romelia met them with hostility, demanding to know who they were. Most of all, she wanted to know how they knew her name or her mom's. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out to her, telling her how relieved she was that she was safe. Inoa held out the walkie-talkie toward Romelia, allowing her to converse with her mother. Back at the Ruiz clan's office, Reina apologized to her daughter for leaving her alone all this time. Romelia clung to the bars on her cell, stunned that she was hearing her mother's voice. Refusing to believe that any of this was true, she accused her own mother of being an imposter. No matter how well he imitated her mother's voice, she wouldn't believe her. Having no other choice, Reina mentioned a moment from their past. When she was 5, she wet the bed and tried to hide it. Before she could say anything else, Romelia conceded and finally believed it was her mother, just so she would stop talking. Mom hit her with the ultimate verification code. Reina wanted Romelia to live a life far away from the Yakuza world. That was why she tried not to see her, but it seems that was a mistake. With a heavy heart, she apologized for making her daughter feel so lonely. On the other end of the walkie-talkie, Romelia broke down in tears as she listened to her mother's words. Still, despite the emotions welling up inside her, she continued talking, her voice gradually softening. As their conversation went on, a bright smile spread across her face. Nearby, Inoa watched the exchange in quiet reflection. He found himself wondering if this was what it truly meant to have a family. Inoa is really wondering about family when his birth certificate is just a bounty notice. Tia leaned against him, pressing her shoulder to his as she playfully told him to calm down, reminding him that he had her. At the same time, Romaria clung to his other arm, admitting that it was bold to say, but he had her too. Inoa let out a soft chuckle, the tension easing from his expression. He admitted that it was true, and with genuine gratitude he thanked them both.